Hello and welcome to episode 15 of If Supr Says It. I am, of course, Supr, and today I'm joined by the former longtime head coach of Spacestation Gaming, Lycan. How are you doing, Lycan?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. And I know like some of the people watching are probably surprised by us doing this
Look at
because,
us.
yeah, look at us now. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Um, but truthfully, like, obviously I meme SSG, our team memes SSG, or even you, and you guys kind of meme us back at times. But I think there is a difference that fans should understand is like, us poking fun at each other and that kind of thing doesn't mean that there's like some dislike or lack of respect for like each other's teams, each other's organizations as players or coaches or staff. Like, it's all in good fun. Sometimes it can maybe get like on that thin line where it's like, okay, now you're kind of
Yeah.
pissing me off. But at the end of the day, it's not like I like it's not like I hate Lycan, or hopefully Lycan doesn't hate me, or like any of our players who have been in, if you've seen the skin arguments on Twitter with SSG, like, there's respect between all of the players, hopefully. And while it might be surprising to see us, come together for this podcast, I think it's actually something you mentioned on Twitter yesterday. It was like, this is going to be the fairest point of view because people know, like, as I just said, it's not like I don't like you or something, but we've both known to kind of always be on the opposite end of a lot of opinions, and
Yeah.
so I'm sure we'll still be on the opposite end of some opinions as we dive into discussing SSG. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I was gonna say, I'm sure a lot of people are here because they just want to immediately see what's going on. They want to know what's going on with SSG, and we will get to that. But I thought it was fair and honestly needed to not immediately just dive into what to the end of SSG with Lycan. Because as far as I'm aware, I believe you have been with SSG since they entered Siege, since like 2018. Is that correct?
Yeah. They signed that team with Redeemer, Trippin, Dave, Chala, and Thinking Nade. It was like the second or last week of February, and
Hmm.
they signed me the first week of March. So they signed without a coach, and then they DM'd people looking for a coach, and I told them that I'd be interested, and that's when I started. So it was pretty much from the beginning.
Yeah, and you know, I think fans in Siege have come and gone. Some are still here, some are new because the game is so old. But for those who don't know, Space Station and Siege is honestly one of the most successful orgs. It's won over $1.7 million. Obviously, SI champions. I think you guys also won USN, maybe the final year of USN or one of the final years that they did USN. Um, Couple time champion even recently in NAL when we were playing on LAN. So it's not like, if you're just getting into the game now or you haven't been around for a while, maybe you're used to a version of SSG that's like pretty good, but not necessarily the best. But there was a period for like, I would say late 2019 through 2020 where SSG was like just the best team. And that's nothing to like laugh at. And you were the coach of that team. Um, so I just want to get your brief thoughts, kind of like on your voyage of 2018, where SSG is starting out. Even the org may have been smaller than now. Obviously, SSG is a pretty
Oh yeah.
well-known org, and you're kind of on this upward trend, honestly, all the way until NAL 2022, and that's where we kind of see, if you want to say like the fall of SSG. I don't even necessarily think it's that, because to me, which I think is funny, is like, obviously everybody's harsh on SSG, and I think it's because SSG has established such a reputation of placing high. But like, for SSG, you guys had a year where you qualified for both SI, so you were in SI 2022, 2023, qualified for a major. You were in Gamers 8. Like, even that is not like a bad year. It's a bad year when you've built up such a reputation of expectation that everyone's expecting you to always win, be first or second. But yeah, let before we get into that, we can talk about kind of how we got there.
Yeah,
So
sure.
starting back with I guess when SSG first was around, you can kind of guide us through to today where we're at.
Yeah, it kind of really starts with the fact that I was a player before.
Mm.
And as like the Xbox players came in, and they had like some roster issues, they were finding ways where the admins were a little bit more forgiving for them, which I did think in a way was kind of needed because of like how confusing it all happened, where they got rid of their league and like the PC players were already there and
Oh yeah, it was a shit
established.
show. Yeah, it was a shit
Yeah,
show.
and the admin back then, Vets to Vets, honestly too, played a lot of favorites and didn't follow the rule book. And
Hmm.
like you can agree with me or not to kind of like prove the validity of that, but my team essentially got bitten hard by the 2/3 or the 3/5 rule, and it dropped us out. And as the Xbox players were coming in, then I had to fight back through Challenger League, which I was in the process of doing and did. And then my team, once we qualified, had like cut me out. So
Yeah.
then I was like, okay, now I got to start all over. And then I was gonna like, I built this team. I built the team in 2 days. We had 1 day of practice, and then we won the qualifiers, and we were qualified into Challenge League, and I was gonna do it all over again, try to get back into Pro League. But
Hmm.
it honestly was exhausting. I think at that point 29, and I was
Yeah.
starting to feel like the only way, and like you can kind of probably say this as well, the only way when you start getting that old is you have to play the game nonstop, because you have to like your body isn't just naturally, like you don't have just the natural reflexes anymore. You have to be trained, whether, and not just, it's not natural anymore. So that was like exhausting. I was going to school full time for my degree, and I had a family at home.
Right.
So Trip and DM me and asked like if I'd be interested, and I was like, well, the only reason why I'm playing was because I wanted to play at the highest level, and like maybe I just can't do that anymore. So
Hmm.
that's when I took the opportunity with Trippin. And yeah, I don't know if you remember that team with Chala and Trippin. They were crazy. They would just like run everywhere. Chala was known for just having Ella and just spraying everything and killing everyone. And it's a lot different than like how I envision the game. A lot of people feel like I envision the game very slowly, which is pretty accurate, I would say. I see the game as more like a chessboard and not
Right.
just like something that you can just run around and do whatever. Just has been a game that's been around forever, and I think it's a proven strategy that like even though someone knows what you're doing, if you're concrete in your ideas, even if they try to counter it, you know what to do to the counter. So it doesn't really matter how much you change, you can keep doing the same thing as long as you execute correctly. That's how
Yeah.
I've always like believed that my team should be run, and I think that was pretty obvious to see, at least in the early years, like
Hmm.
that it did work, and it was like a proven strategy, because we were so successful. But yeah, so the early years I had Dave and Trippin, who were, I would say, no offense to them because they were great players, but they were not top four players in my opinion. So when I was on the
Yeah.
team, I tried to start training the rest of the team how to communicate together and work together, and not just start making solo plays all over the place, while I was looking for new people to replace those people once I got my first chance, which is pretty awful to say, but like I am a very competitive person and I wanted to be at the top.
I mean,
And I,
that's that's the business. Like,
yes, exactly.
obviously, like I teamed with Xander and even Kansan, who is like a little bit of a different issue, but once I was done playing, like my goal is to win, and I'm trying to envision what is the best team to win. And sometimes, we've been squad wiped the Sonics before. It's like sometimes you do have to let go of people you're close to or people that you think are really good players because you think you can get even 1% better of a player. Like that those kind of differences matter. So it is like it does in a way sound like bad to hear, like, oh, I was just waiting for a chance to like make changes here, but like everybody who's, especially if you're like staff or a coach, like your job depends on winning, the business is winning. you don't want these standing in mediocrity for too long, because that's when it's like, well, you're the one that's going to get changed at that point.
Yeah. So we heard pretty early on. It was like after, like it was about the time that DreamHack Austin was happening. We were really looking to get Vert actually first because he
Mm,
was him and high with his situation on, it was Mouse, I believe, at the time. And it just didn't end up working with him, but we did end up getting Shuttle, who I thought was like a huge pickup for us. And I had played with Rampy, who was still kind of like a come up player at the time. I had just had firsthand experience because I played with him on Risky, like how his comms were and how dedicated he was. And those ended up being the people who we grabbed, which I would say was the first time people started really being threatened by us, was that roster with Redeem, Chala, Nade, Rampy, and Shuttle. Like I think that's like when we actually were a top contender for the major spots.
yeah, and for those of you who like, again, are newer, you might be thinking of like Astralis Shuttle, where he's maybe struggling a little bit, but Shuttle was like in 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
I teamed with him on Rogue. He was like one of the best NA players for sure. I do remember at that point, I don't think it's the same, but he had like an issue with communicating where like sometimes instead of like talking, he would literally just type in the chat like the call outs, which was always funny. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that is a strong team. Like if you're listening to that team now, you're like that team sucks. But like back then, it was pretty solid.
Yeah, and that was the first time we were really like making deep runs in qualifiers. Like we got beat out by the Obey roster who ended up going to Paris, but we were like getting very close to making major spots. We were still like a young team who was like losing to other people at minors, but it was like, oh, we are like so close. Like
Hmm.
that's kind of how we were. And then I do think through Shuttle also like growing up as a person, he did get better, and I don't want to like knock him or anything, but he had to pretty much leave our team because of attitude issues. Him and Rampy didn't get along, and then near the end it was like I gotta leave immediately because him and Redeem like had an issue.
Hmm.
And then he ended up going to Rogue, I believe, with
Hmm.
that roster.
Yeah.
And when that happened, we picked up Brian for just basically to make it to the end of the stage. But the big pickup for us that year was getting Bosco when Obey split up. And that's,
Right.
I think, when we went from, okay, this team's now a threat to this team is now a top contender team with Bosco on it.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
I said yesterday, and I think Bosco is somewhat officially retired. I think he also left like a window open where it's like if he's feeling like he wants to come back after a little break. But Bosco, in my opinion, is like the best, not counting Canadian because I count him as a Canadian, but like
oh,
Bosco
okay.
is the best like North American player like Siege has had. At least right now, obviously, years from now we'll see. But yeah, and all of that, all of those accomplishments that Bosco has to make him, in my opinion, the best NA player, that's all from SSG.
Yeah.
So that obviously is like, a like basically having the number one draft pick, and you get like some, LeBron or something to help build your team around.
Yeah, and that was when it was like the minus lax plus lax because they were also
Yeah.
trying to grab Bosco, and we basically just had like a bunch of tryouts with him where he felt like it was the most team like situation. And
Hmm.
he said that they kind of like argued in the tryout over there, and it didn't feel like it was like as concrete as a situation. So he just felt more at home with us. But I do agree with you. I'll say like my little piece on that too, really quick. I think that Bosco is the best North American player ever, like all time. I think Canadian is the best leader, shot caller, like in North America. Like I do think that like they both are up there, but for different reasons.
Right.
So like
100%.
that's like my little distinction. I do think that Bosco is the best player. Like doesn't
Hmm.
have to be calling. Like he started calling near the end, but I think Troy is the best at like calling and like bringing his team together and all that stuff. But
Yeah, I
two
think
different
that's, yeah,
yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, so once we got Bosco, then that was the first time we went to DreamHack Winter. And in DreamHack Winter, it was like a lot of firsts for us. We went to a minor where we got out of groups for the first time. We actually got all the way to the semifinals, but we fell to Penta there. ended up placing fourth when we played against Empire. But those minors back then, it was so weird. There was like no difference really between getting third or fourth. So that game was just kind of like a and also they played their game, then we played ours. We literally got beat, and that was like to get the SI spot. So we were crushed. And they're like,
Yeah.
go over there and go play your match. And we were
like, well, can we just forfeit?
Yeah. No, the funny thing too was we had to play them on Consulate, which is a map we didn't play a whole lot, and they were very good at. And we 7-1 them, and we're like, holy shit, we're just gonna beat these guys and we're gonna win. And then they wiped us on the next two maps. It was bad,
Yeah.
like bad. But yeah, so I mean, that was like our first like, hey, top 4 finish minor, like this is us, like we're gonna start getting the ball rolling, and then we moved into December or January, I don't remember where the quals were, and we won the qual to go to SI.
Right.
So, and then at that SI, we got out of groups, which was a pretty strong group. We had Empire in our group, and we had Immortals, who ended up later becoming MIBR, which was a good team. That was like Cyber was on that team when he was younger. So that was like a really cool moment for us, and it really kind of started making it seem like, hey, we have the right tools. We just got to keep working.
You're like building the foundation. Like you found a couple players. You have Rampy, Bosco. It's kind of like, as you said, you have to always keep an eye on the team and see like, okay, I've got 2 players or 3 players now. I need to find 2 more to like put on this team, because you see it's getting good enough.
And I think there was something that doesn't really get touched on a lot about that event, that I've always held pretty dear. And that event, actually, G2 through the whole event lost 1 map. And that map was to us in the quarterfinals. And we went to last round overtime on Villa in map 3. We almost beat G2, and they ended up winning the whole thing.
And this is like prime G2, like
prime G2.
Yeah, with like Fabian Pengu.
So yeah, for me, it was like everything's clicking, like what we are doing, like it is the right thing, like we are moving forward every step. Like it was just like there wasn't really any steps back. It was always like new achievement, new achievement, new achievement. So yeah, it felt really good back then. And like we did continue to make changes, I would say pretty quickly, but they were all, I think, for the right reasons. Because right after that event was when we replaced Redeemer. Redeemer retired and became the coach later on for OXG. We ended up, unfortunately, replacing him with Brian, which made no sense. That was probably like one of the trolliest, probably one of the trolliest things we did. But yeah, we just thought that like it was probably Redeemer's time, and we had to like make a quick replacement, and it just ended up being a plug-in with Brian, giving him a second chance, and it just like didn't end up working for all the same reasons it didn't work out before. So then we did like end up obviously replacing him again, but yeah, the event was really good for us, and I thought it started like leading to really good things like in the next year, 2019.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what led you to eventually get Fultz and Troy for about a year or so, and that was kind of where that's like the height of SSG, is that roster. And I also think, like, as you mentioned earlier, you said that you're a fan of more of like a slower, structured kind of style of pace. And I think that like that time period, the meta, like perfectly aligned with that philosophy. Like right now, I think it gets like a lot of criticism because honestly, in my opinion, a lot of strategies like out the window now. It's kind of like everybody's got really good gun skill. You run trap operators to stop people from running at you, and a lot of it's going to just come down to like winning gunfights the majority of the time. And, that's not to say there's not strategy, but during this period, this was like the Goyo shield. Like this was perfectly aligned for how you see the game, and honestly, how I think a lot of Troy's teams play, where they're also more methodical and like pace. Yeah. And like this was just like prime SSG. Like you guys for a year and a half period here were just like, I would say the best in the world, top 2 at least in this entire period.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a lot easier to play that way when I would say overall the attack style for a lot of teams were super bland. Like in general, it was like, even for like when Chalet first came out, which was still like fairly new, people for like bar, they would repel in Sunside. You'd get master, you'd get piano, you'd get office, then you'd open up the office wall, then you'd throw a million different things at the fucking L2 or
Yeah.
top IV shield, and then you'd destroy that. And it was like, very, very, I would say boring overall. Like, I think we found out slowly from Latan teams, like, hey, just walk in lobby and go into the bar and kill the guy in sight. And
That's
then
what
are
we
they
did.
gonna
I
do?
think we were like kind of way ahead of meta on Chalet because
Yeah, no, I
we never
agree.
did like map over clears. We always just went direct. We just were like running in the site, and nobody like pretty soon nobody would play us on Chalet anymore. They're like, what? These guys have got some like they got the map on their hand or something.
No, I remember there was. Now I'm not going to remember the stage, but I think it was stage 2. It might have been stage 1, and I didn't want us to go to Chalet, but it
Mhm.
was we had to ego chow you guys on theme, which was like no info for either, and they were scared. So we banned it, and then we went to Chalet, and then you guys beat us, and afterwards you were like, "Why'd you guys take us to Chalet?" And I just
Like
remember,
us?
I just remember afterwards being like, "Yep." Like, I mean, why did we do
Everybody in
this?
NA should know. Don't play the Sonics on
Why did we
Chalet.
do this? But I mean, the game plan going into that game was not to do that. But it
Yeah.
was like in the rooms up there in the VIP room. It was last minute. It was like we shouldn't go to theme, and I was like, oh, guys, like we talked about this the night before, but they like lost confidence on it. I was like, all right, let's do it. We're going to Chalet. We're gonna win, and we
Yeah.
didn't, and we didn't. But yeah, so that team with Troy, I mean, obviously we kind of got a steal in Fultz because he first was getting picked up by XLG, but they hadn't signed with TSM yet. And we played him in like the Allied
Wasn't
Esports
yeah,
squalls.
wasn't I that actually just reminded me of something. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, go
But
ahead.
wasn't there a point there where I know Merc and Fultz because they were like a duo and
Hmm.
they were going to sign with XLG or whatever they were, and then they got contacted by you guys, but Merc had already signed and Fultz had not signed, and so he like is that kind of what happened? That's what I remember being told.
Yeah, so I just had heard a lot of rumors about Merck's attitude back then.
Hmm.
But I honestly didn't know much about Fultz. It was more of the guys saying like from playing
Yeah, he
with
was
him in
really
ranked and
good.
stuff that he was really good. And he was a math player, and I needed to get rid of Brian like ASAP. It was becoming a it was becoming like a big problem. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna get in an interview with this kid. That's what I did a lot with like new players, was I just kind of wanted to get a feel for like how they answered questions. And he
Right.
impressed me a lot. So we played them. It was like, yeah, it was Bio, Achieved, Merck, Fultz, and I'm not sure who was the other one on that roster then.
Is it
But
like Crusher or something?
yeah, it
Like,
was some,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So we played them in the finals and we beat them. So we got the allied spot. And then I told Fultz after that qual, because that qual was when I was really having a lot of problems with Brian. I was like, if you want to come over before you sign, I need to know right now, and we're doing it. And he said, I'm down. Let's do it. And he left Merck to
Hmm.
like come join us.
Yeah.
But there was no like trying to get both of them because I just didn't have room for both of them. I really
Okay.
believed in like the rest of the roster. But yeah, so that team was working pretty well. Fultz was starting to help call. I think calling was like always a big problem that we had back then, was
Hmm.
having someone who could consistently call. And we just had a lot of people back then who were just generally quiet in comms. We had Chala and Nade. And Rampy is pretty active in comms, but like being top down, I feel like he finds himself distracted a lot. So we had a huge issue with calling, and we like put a lot of it on Fultz, who he did say he could call a little bit, but he was still very young,
Right.
and he didn't want to do it. Raleigh, we did have some success. I felt like our group was pretty easy for Raleigh, but we made it out of Raleigh, and then we lost the secret in the quarters. And then that's when like like Troy had enough with EG or whatever, and he
Yeah.
was like looking to
I think they
change.
got grouped at that tournament.
Yeah, they
If I
were in
remember
our group.
correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think Giants made it out with us or something. I don't remember who did, but after that was when people started talking to Troy. Troy was like interested in joining, and it was like a big. I think that too, with like how big Troy's always been big, but Troy, I feel like back then was like kind of even bigger than he is now. I feel like with like the new fans that have come in, he's like kind of not as a big name as he was back then. Like EG, he wasn't just like a shot caller. He was
They had
also
like the documentary and everything about like him and Pengu and all that kind of stuff too. So yeah, he was like, I wouldn't say he's like Bolo, but he was like the face of the like him and Pengu were the face of the game
yes,
at that point.
100%. I agree. So, and then when Troy came in, he said, I don't want to do things my way. I want to do things the way that you guys do them. Just teach me how to call it and I'll do it. And like that was like the final, like, we have like the right like thing to do. We have the right ingredients, like we have the right people now. Now it's time to win, you know? And we kind of trolled, I'd say at first. We put Troy on like entry roles. We still like weren't really sure like how we wanted to look in that first stage. And it did look kind of messy. But immediately after the stage, we changed the roles to what they ended up being for like the USN 2019 win and almost the OGA win. And then the eventual like SI 2020 win where Troy was on Breach, and then he was assisted by Bosco, and then we had Fultz and Rampy just killing everybody in the front, and then Nade was just the unstoppable backstop on the flank watch.
Yeah. Just never flank. That was literally like the mantras, like just never even try to flank SSG because this guy's just gonna be sitting there like you can't kill him. Like,
I mean, I said it a lot, but I don't feel like people really like took it. I mean, I think when you talk about your own teammates on social media, some people just to a certain extent are like, yeah, he's just like hyping up his teammates.
yeah, yeah.
But I used to always say most of what we could do or would do was impossible without Nade, and I still believe that to this day. Like you can see when we got rid of Nade, how quickly things became a problem for us because he could.
It's like a glue player.
Yes, 100%. And like any time that our whole goal was first take map control, see what they're going to do when we got it, and then now we make our move. And we don't have to worry about losing this map control because we have Nade, who's going to kill anyone who tries to take it back from us. Right. And, you know, when we lost that, we had a lot of different players come in who wanted to do it different ways, and it would just cause like problems for what we wanted to do. I would say in just different ways, but yeah, Nade was a huge like player for us back then, and I don't think he gets enough credit.
I think it's like, you know, the glue player on a team. It's kind of like in any sports, like in the NBA, for instance. Like you've got a couple star players on your team. Like on this team, you have at this point like 4 star players. You know, I think Rampy was the MVP of SI. Fultz was like seen as one of the better players in the world. Canadian's obviously Canadian, and Bosco, as we've already discussed, is arguably the best NA player of all time. So like if you're Nade on that team, like you're never gonna get the shine, right? Yeah. Like you're just the flank watch guy, you're just the guy who does the dirty work. And
I used to joke with him a lot about the fact that they would never show his perspective in matches because frankly most of what he would do is boring. And also too, if like we were showing screens, I would joke, I'd be like, Nade, I don't need your screen today. Because like because what he did was like super boring to watch, like for anybody, and he did it so good that it was like never a problem that I needed to critique. So he 100%. He just like held it all together, but like never really got any shine. He would get kills, but they weren't shown. And I mean, I feel like most people like just said like, oh, he's so cool because he has a throw, but like Nade was like so much more than that for our team. He like,
and I think you can even see that he was kind of and you know, I don't really have an opinion on it because I didn't play with him, but like you can see he was undervalued or underrated or whatever you want to say by other teams, because after SSG, that was it for Nade. I don't think he ended up on another team. So you know, for whatever reason, the rest of the league maybe never saw the value he brought to SSG, which is unfortunate. But I mean, he won a lot of money while he was playing, so. You know, I guess he's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I guess after this time period leads into 2021, and this is kind of a different era of SSG. 2021, if I recall, is like where people said SSG had like almost like a super team in a way. Like you guys kind of after stage 1, you guys brought in Hot and Cold to join your team. And you guys are pretty much dominant in NA. I think you lost 1 match, and it was to us, if I recall correctly. And the problem, I guess, was for the team is that ended up not necessarily transferring to the majors. I think you guys had top 8 majors, and then at NAL finals is like you guys basically tied for last, and that SI was top 12. What do you think was the? Because I don't want to say this team was necessarily. It's like this is what I was mentioning earlier. Is like people will say SSG have like been falling off, and it's sure in comparison to the Troy era of SSG, but this is still in 2021. 2 NAL first place finishes, 2 top 8 major finishes, and you made SI. Like that's not a bad year for most teams, but for SSG, the fans are like, well, what the hell's going on with SSG? And maybe it's the expectations of like the Supr team. People like had a better idea of what they were expecting. But what was your opinion on like this era of the team?
I think a big thing I'll say too is I think by how I portray myself and how I talk on social media, it does allow for like people to even see like I would say most teams would be blessed to have the year that we had
Mm-hmm.
in 21. But it still is considered a failure because of how I act and how I expect. Because I do like think that we should have done better, you know. But I think
Yeah.
that's a big reason for it is when you talk a big game and you don't live up to the game, you're going to be told that you're shit and you kind of just have to eat it, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And I think when it's done to me and it is logical, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll take that. But there are times when I'll talk about it here later on in the podcast, but when shit
Okay.
is talked about me and it's not valid.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so this team, I would say, like always, I think our biggest problem was always calling. I think we had a team who was very confident when we were against people who we knew really well, or that we felt like we matched up against really well, that we would dominate them. But the problem was when we went international and now we were facing the other best teams around the world, or we were not sure how they were going to play, or a little bit uncomfortable with what they were doing, our calling comms would go like out the window. I like to call it small talk, is like what I told the team a lot. It's like all the small comms, like, hey, I'm trying to do this, but this guy's doing this. I need help. Oh, hey, I'm not like, I can't do anything over here. I'll come help you now. Like those, like, it's not just like, there's one guy top Ivy, there's a guy playing pot, like there's a guy fire, like those comms, those will always come out, but like those call outs don't mean anything if you can't like actually talk to each other about how you're going to make a move on each one of those spots and how you're going to explode into the round. And those kind of comms were what we were missing internationally through 2021. And I would like when Matt first joined the team, he was doing, I would say, a heavy amount of lifting in the stage 2 when we first picked him up, and he did struggle internationally. So then when we had this whole fallout with Nade and we picked up Alex, I tried to have him do a lot into stage 3 with only a little bit of Matt, and we did kind of run into the same problems where like the calling regionally was very different than what ended up being the calling internationally. And I think that's where like we would get out of groups fine, but then when we got against the other teams who were like the top teams, it was just like, who are we? Like this is a different team. Why did we load up this way? Like this is not us. And that's like I think what our biggest struggle was.
Do you think that and we'll get into 2022 and like right now in a second, but do you think that some of this problem, because 2021 in my opinion is when the meta really started to shift towards more of like an aggressive meta. I think the Finka meta was starting a little bit too. Do you think that it was the calling that was an issue, or is it a mix of the philosophy and the calling? Because in my opinion, like playing a very slow paced style, which is what SSG has really always been known for, when you're going into these international tournaments and you're playing like, 2021 NIP or teams like that, and they're just like running at you and doing all this crazy stuff, and they're hitting the map everywhere and that kind of thing. Is it just like almost the philosophy is a little dated and what you're playing against, so you don't know how to deal with it? Or do you think like it was just a matter of the team didn't have like a true IGL who could call stuff that they're not familiar with, like they can't adapt to what they're seeing in that kind of way, I guess you'd put it maybe?
Yeah, I would say that it is the latter, almost 100%. And I know that a lot of people will disagree with me. And I think we're seeing a lot of the old guard just being completely removed for them from the game for younger players who can just run around. And I think
Mhm.
it's a huge knee-jerk reaction. But like I said, I do view the game, a tactical first-person shooter is very similar to chess in a lot of ways. Like
Right.
if a team is gonna play aggressive on you on the upfront, that just means that you need to respond accordingly. Like I would say all the way back when we were still like very successful in doing all that stuff, one team that was very good at like trying to mess with us a lot was TSM. Like an Achieve used to say it all the time. All you need to do is get very aggressive on their drones early, shoot like 4 of them if you can, and get back to site. Now they got no drones and they're going to take forever. Like that was something that worked really well. And over time, we learned, hey, if these teams are going to be aggressive, we need to not just like all show up at the same spot. We need to start playing cutoffs. We need to start like being a little bit more like forward and knowing that these teams are going to be doing different things to us. And you can still play methodical and as a team, but you have to do it in a different way than like just like being very slow altogether, pushing or whatever.
So you
But
still think that like your philosophy that essentially you've had since 2018 that you won SI in 2020, you think like the slower methodical play style can still work if you have the players that can execute it properly, and you just haven't had, I guess, over the span, players who are necessarily able to uh, be as effective as your 2020 team?
100%. And I think that we can get into that a little bit, but I will just say
Okay.
like really quick stats. Like the stage two of last year, we had like almost near a 70% attack percentage
Hmm.
doing that exact style. And stage three with Yeti, we had a 61% attack percentage. So like what we were doing before, and we'll talk about what happens after Sweden, but what we were doing was working.
Do you feel
The,
like do you feel like it's do you feel like you almost need to have like a different mind of how to attack when you go internationally though? Because like you said, like you can attack a certain way within NA and it can work because you know the team so well and everything. But when you go internationally and you're playing some of these, because we had this issue as well, we were the number one attacking team for the majority of the NAL.
Mhm.
But then when we would go internationally, some of it was honestly simply because some of us didn't get enough kills when we played the better teams. Like that's just how it went. That's why we ended up replacing a lot of people. But some of it was also just like some of the things that I called that would work in NA, I wouldn't be able to call against these international teams because like they're just in your fucking face immediately, so you don't have the opportunity to do things like that. Do you think that it's almost like do you think that the philosophy of like of what you guys were doing in NA should just work internationally, or do you think there should be adjustments made to change it to where you're better prepared to play against some of the more aggressive, some of the crazier kind of teams that you're not used to facing all the time?
100%. You have to change how you like go about being like a team that's still working together because
Mm,
they just won't allow you to. Like like just a very basic, if you are very slow, the European teams will play back and let you burn all your time. If you're
right.
winning rounds and they are having a problem with you, they are going to get like in your face. But I think a perfect way to just explain how it can work as being aggressive but still being structured is what we like to call the OXG attack on Chalet, which is like you have people at like the big window, you have someone ready to jump in like the arch window, you have someone like ego ready to go, and like no one is together, but like when you clear pot and that guy drops, you guys all jump in and we're like you're all trading out. Like it does
Mm,
seem like it's like aggressive and kind of like everywhere, but it is a planned strat and everyone has an idea
right.
and a goal. And like that to me is still a structured attack, but it does like in a way while you're watching it look like, oh god, these guys are aping everywhere, like they're just kind of getting aggressive. But I do think that attack is still a structured attack. Like everyone has a plan and a goal, and like you, after you get those kills, then you stop, you figure out who's left over, if there's a guy in sight, and then you make your next plan of action.
Yeah, I mean, and we had a stat the last one, the year that we finished top six SI and one NAL, that we were the second fastest paced team in the world besides Furia in terms of like when we were actually executing, but all of our stuff was structured. Like
100%.
we were fast, but we were just like so practiced and comfortable doing the structured take that we would just do it like it was like clockwork. Like we're executing at a minute every time, but it was still structured. And I do think like, you know, the phases of the world, or at least the former phase, like you never know what the fuck is going on when you're playing them. Like they're throwing yings outside and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I do think there's definitely a difference between like just being aggressive and like having just aggressive strats, I guess you'd say, or aggressive plans. But that does, yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Just to like finish off like the whole thought process about international and how that changes your viewpoint. I do think it is very easy to sit at home and play regionally and practice regionally and see things that just constantly work. And I think the biggest problems that a lot of teams have that I really tried to like not let us get into, but it's really hard, and you can probably talk about this a little bit as well, is like once you get out of the honeymoon phase, like even if it's within the same team but you have new strats, like the strats that you create, they're like in a way, like especially in this meta, they're meant to be flexible. Like if these people are here, then you're doing this. If these people are here, then you're doing this. But as you scrim and you practice those strats, then I think the players inherently are like, oh, for this one I do this. And like they take something that's supposed to be flexible and they make it, well, this is what I'm supposed to do on this every time. Because you'll hear that after like a match or scrims, you're like, hey man, like there was a guy over here. I needed help. Like whatever. You're like, well, I'm the big window player. It's like we didn't need a big window player in this situation. Like I needed more help over on this side. I couldn't get in to do what I was supposed to do. Like we needed people to move around. And it's like, well, I was supposed to be like, you know, I'm the guy over here doing this.
To me, that does come down to a level of game sense or like higher level game thinking. Whereas like you can run the strat, but you know when you can deviate and you're able to just identify that and call something. And I think that's something like our team has always done pretty well with like the United guys is like we do have strats, but everybody has good enough game knowledge or I guess maybe even fearlessness where they're just going to, if they see a play, they're going to take it. And I think that is actually like what you just mentioned is a huge difference between like a championship level player and like a pro or like, you know, make a major every now and then kind of players. Like
I agree.
You have to be able to make decisions on your own and like the right decisions, and you can't just be like stuck to like glued to everything you're doing, because that, you know, what you said is earlier is what's going to happen is like you go to these tournaments, you play these international teams, and you're not going to be able to just sit on the window the whole game. Like it's not going to work. You have to be able to decide for yourself what you're going to do, because you also like at a major level, nobody should be being micromanaged either. Like that goes back to game sense as well, as like people have to be able to make the right decisions. And if you don't have players like that, that kind of comes down to like maybe that player's not, it's a good player, but it's not like you're not going to win a tournament with that kind of player.
Yeah, I agree.
But that can kind of lead us up to, I guess, what most people are probably interested in, which is the 2022, 2023, like the end of your era on SSG.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll just skip right ahead to stage 3, which is when you guys made a roster change. And I think originally you were supposed to pick up Dexter, who ended up playing at Gamers 8 with you, and you end up with Yeti.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if you just want to walk us through stage 3 real quick, and then we can get into Sweden.
Yeah, sure. So Gamers 8, I think, went fairly well with Dexter. We like initially were going to just go ahead and stay with him until like obviously you guys made the change. Really quickly, I'll just kind of touch on that a little bit because I have no skin in the game anymore. But with Dexter, like when you have a new player, this is just in general, you kind of, as a coach, you expect that person to be the first one in the Discord when you show up, or the first one in the prac room, and you expect that player to be the last one that gets off his PC afterwards. Like,
right.
That person has the most to learn. That person should be I mean, everyone should be hungry, but that guy should be the hungriest to like learn and like digest. And by the time after we had got done with Gamers 8, there was still callouts that he didn't know on maps. There was strats that he would have to be reminded of in the prep phase. So like it wasn't about like where people were playing on the enemy team. It was us like telling him how the strat would go. So like we were losing time in the prep phase. And to me, it felt like he just didn't want it as much as I wanted him to want it. So that
Yeah.
was like the big reason for what happened. And I'll even say, like, and I have no ill will against Dexter. I actually thought he was a good dude, but I did hear things afterwards when he went on to Mirage and his like scrim performance versus match performance. At the end of the day, I think that we made the right change going with Xander.
Oh, trust me,
After
as a I don't play anymore, but I've heard some stuff about some of Dexter or even Mirage scrim moments where this guy's the second coming of Pengu and scrims, and not a bad player by any means,
yeah,
but
100%.
not necessarily the player you see in scrims. I actually had a question, because while we're on the topic of roster changes, this is something that was just brought up a lot over the course, and you and Rampy have been like basically just tied together since the very beginning. And Rampy has taken a lot of heat, and now he's no longer on SSG, which is kind of fitting that you're no longer on it and Rampy's no longer on it now,
Right.
because you guys were always seen as like tied together. There was always, especially following SI, where Rampy's performance seemed to like dip off, or like the inconsistencies kind of crept up, that a lot of people were calling for Rampy to be replaced. Was that ever a thought in your head, or were you always confident that like you could trust Rampy to play? He knew how you wanted to play. Like, you knew that even if he is inconsistent, him going inconsistent is like -5 or -10. It's not like he's just like getting just absolutely destroyed. Or was that ever something that you like really contemplated, is like, do we need to make a change for Rampy?
Yeah, I would say it didn't actually. So there was a. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the time after this last SI, but I would say afterwards, when I was not gone,
Hmm.
there was a period of time where I was still on the team. Was the first time we actually had that conversation about Rampy as a team. I think Rampy's like biggest problem always on the team was his day to day like mental.
Yeah, we
Um,
always thought it was super easy to get in Rampy's head when we were playing you guys. We literally just would scream at Rampy, or like if he would miss a shot, just like say something, and we just if he like Rampy's a kind of player, and I think Rampy's a good player. I just think he, like you mentioned, does have the inconsistency. Rampy to me is the kind of player where if he starts off bad, like that's just a bad map. Like there's no recovering it, which is honestly kind of a big deal for a player. Like you have to be able to like round around kind of thing. But that was always something that at least I thought playing against him.
yeah, there was not anyone more on the team that would go through what the player would tell me, like I'm going through a slump. There was
Mm,
no one else like on the team that would say that more than him. So I do think like, yeah, the I always believed in him, like, and I thought the team did as like if we were to drop him, like I think the conversation would have been like for who. And that would have been a
right.
big problem, is to figure out someone that can fill his shoes. Cause I do believe that like when Rampy is in a great mental headspace, that he's one of the best players like in North America as a top down player. I think it just has been really easy for him to have any kind of like doubt put in, and then like it makes him like not perform to his full potential. But we hadn't really ever had like with Troy, I think we did really begin to have like problems with the outside of the game issues, because they would butt heads.
Mm.
And then again with Alex, it was like not right away, but like near the end, it was the
Did you ever
same
did you
thing.
did you ever think, and we'll get into the stage, I don't want to talk too much about Rampy, but did you ever think that like if there were reoccurring problems where Rampy was butting heads with Troy or Skies or anybody else, that it was a Rampy issue, or was it just like something you just lived with, I guess you'd say?
Right, which is why like I said, like after this SI was when it became like a conversation we actually had.
Okay.
So like yeah, it did become a thing. I would say we did see. I don't think like with Troy it was like what it was with Alex. It was pretty different between the two of those. But because like most of what people saw on social media was after Troy left, he felt that Troy betrayed us. And like people saw that side of Rampy, I think, really for the first time. And then like he started to kind of get a lot of hate for it. But it was not like that when Troy was on the team. It was like he felt that because it was after roster locks and Troy made that announcement. And then it was like, now we have to play with our analyst and like you left
Hmm.
us. We're supposed to be brothers and all of this kind of thing. But yeah, it was really kind of at the beginning of this last year, and I would even say it was really starting to happen with Xander in, I would say, more late December, early January was when it began with him. So then that's like, as a team we were like, we have to like honestly have a discussion because it's like now it's like a thing that's
Three
actually,
different people, yeah.
yeah. So that's kind of like what I'd say. Like, yeah, it was like not ever really a conversation before that, but it began to become one because of like we started seeing repeated patterns then.
Okay. And then obviously you guys ended up picking Yeti for stage 3 from us, and he was, I don't think they did an MVP for some reason for stage 3, but in my opinion, Yeti was probably the MVP of stage 3. Probably him or Rexon in terms of just like individual performance, which led you
Mhm.
guys into Sweden. Um, and now we can just talk about Sweden. What kind of went on there with the team?
Yeah, I will say this is I'm gonna toot my own horn for a second and say that like this is like proof that I do know how to bring someone into a system and I do know how to get the best out of them. I think you can easily go look at Xander's stats from the last stage that he played with you guys, and then go
Mm.
look at the turnaround and stats that he had with us in stage 3. And this is nothing bad on you guys because you obviously have a different system than us. But also you can say go look at Hot. Like Hot struggled on DZ. I picked up Hot, and then Hot blew out the rest of the year.
Well, Hot and
So
Cold had like MVP performance on Mirage, and then
that's
went to
true.
you guys. So the thing about Xander too is our systems are vastly different. Like on our
Yeah.
team, Xander was like honestly more of a support player, and he would play to die on the
Hmm.
roam, and we're just like hitting side every second. You guys obviously play way different, but I do think that you guys. I thought SSG had Xander in his more natural roles than on our team, because on our team he wasn't able to play that because we have Grixer.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, obviously, huge turnaround from him, because at the end of the day, Xander did struggle on our team for a while, and I do think part of that is the role. Like anybody who plays that role for us is not going to do as great. Like look at Gunner; he's not doing bad. He goes like even, but like that guy was going plus 30 before he joined our team. It's kind of just the role on the team.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
but yeah,
Uh,
sorry to interrupt.
no, you're good. Yeah, I kind of that's I mean why I'm doing this with you is because I feel like it is a way to be able to hear more than just my side.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so when he joined us, and I would say we were looking to still be who we were. Like I said, in that stage 2 we had, even though we ended up, I mean, that was the craziest, closest stage ever in NAL history. We like ended up all the way down in like 8th or ninth, but we were 2 points away from being top 4.
Right,
But we just lost that last game to Astralis. Where we had the crazy like SSD fry like after the first round, and we lost the second round, and then it like kind of shattered everyone because we like didn't have really a chance at that point. That stage was still like I would say fairly good for us. The first one was pretty bad, but it was that stage was going well for us until I would say we played you guys, and we had like the whole Asian drama that ended up coming out, and it kind of crushed the team's like full mental spirit. But we still, that was what I said, like that stage had an insane attacking percentage. We had like a 70%, like it was unheard of insane. But our defensive percentage was abysmal. It was like 30%. We could
right,
not win defenses, but I really thought the most of it was because we did not get along. Like defenses, you have to have really good synergy. You have to get good communication. The round is always different because you don't really get to dictate anything. Where the attack goes is what dictates it, and then you have to play around it and play together. But our like just team chemistry and everything at that point was so bad that like we just could not like play together.
And
And so
this was
that's
like the rumor of Asian who ended up playing for Parabellum replacing Skies, I think it
yeah.
was, or something like
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
And that came out like the day before we
Was
played
that a
you.
true thing
No,
or okay?
I had never heard. I I knew he was playing in CL, but I never talked to him ever before the rumor came out. Like not
Hmm.
even played ranked with him, not even anything. So when it came out, I was like, "What?" I was like, "I don't even know. I've never talked to this guy." And then I remember because he responded to my tweet because I was so mad that like people were saying it that I just tweeted out, "I've never talked to Azian before." And then he
Yeah.
responded onto it, "Hi," and I was like, "Look, this is the first time we've ever talked to each other." But like it was ridiculous, and I was losing it because like there
I
was
remember
already.
hearing that rumor. I don't know. Again, I don't know how it started. If you never talked to him, or for all we know, maybe somebody on your team reached out to him, and that's how it started. Or maybe
Yeah,
somebody just said that, and that's how it built up. But I had heard that as well, actually.
yeah, I know that like it was a rumor. Well, at least how it started was an exet party, now
Okay.
M80, and he was there apparently, and he had told other people that he was getting PL offers, and then people had heard that like the rumor for a while that like we were looking to replace Alex, and then I think assumptions were made that he was coming to us, and
Hmm.
then that all kind of went from where it was.
Were
But
you guys actually? Were you thinking about replacing Alex after the stage, regardless, whether it was Asian or somebody else?
at that point it had been something that I brought up, and I can talk about that too. There was
Okay.
so most people know like I have a family, so I'm here, and
Right.
like this is something I'll talk about a little bit later also, but always a week before whatever game we play, I would arrive in Vegas. Not any time before that. I would always arrive a week before, and anyone on the team ever can like say that that's true. And so I was at home. It was like between like the SI 2022, like well, like yeah. So before
Mm.
it was the previous one. Um, we had decided that like I felt like we rushed too much with Alex's shot calling, and that I wanted to come back more into like our style. And I felt like Bosco would be perfect for that. You know, he was a very studious person, went to college and graduated. He's a very smart person just in general. So I was like,
Hmm.
I want to try Bosco IGLing. And I think in that moment, I lost Alex. Like I think lost a lot of faith in me because he did. I think he had a lot of confidence in the fact like he had an insane amount of plants. Like he was good on hard support for us. I just thought that like a lot of our plays were left up to chance with how he was calling. And I wanted it to be less up to chance. And I thought a better person for that would be Bosco calling instead of him. But he like took, I think, a lot of offense to it, which I can understand because I did it in front of everyone. Like I said, like, hey, this next stage we're going to try with Bosco, and it was kind of like I was ripping away something from him, and I think it lost him a little bit. So then I went back home, and during a scrim, there was some altercation when we were trying to do a cafe bake attack. And at the end of like everything that was said between the players, he goes, "No problem. It's always me anyway."
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh, okay, like now, like, and everyone went silent, you know, and now we have like an altercation that's a problem, and I'm not at the house. So then afterwards, I was messaging with him on WhatsApp, and eventually I had said something that he read, and he never responded to me again, which is the
Mm.
first time that had ever happened to me as a coach. He just left me on red. He was done with what I had to say. And,
Yeah.
you know, he was like, and so I felt like, okay, this is the beginning of all the things I'd ever heard bad about Alex. Because like obviously there was things that hurt like about rumors about him on rec and like all these things like
Yeah.
he's passive aggressive and stuff like that. And like we hadn't had any of that with him at all. But like that happened and like I was like, okay, this is the beginning of like I think problems, and if I allow this to continue, it's going to get worse.
Hmm.
And it was actually when Grix's contract was up, and
Hmm.
Grix was like, I think, looking to use people to find a way to provide value for himself. And I took the bait and I said, yeah, if you want to come over, we'll take you. And then after that, he got like the money, and but it left us in a position where we had now just offered for another player, And I knew Alex was going to find out about it. And he did. He quickly found out about the fact that we were shopping around for other people. But I will just say, in general, if a player like Grixer is like going to say that he's looking for other offers, Grixer can replace, I would say, at least 3 people on everyone's roster. You don't
There was,
have.
well, so I will say there actually was a very real point where this was like 2 years ago now, but where Grixer, Pablo wanted more money, and we weren't in a position where we necessarily wanted to offer that money because our team wasn't like having, like, it was like the first year after the team, so you kind of want to like let the team develop.
Yeah.
And we even had discussions where we actually agreed to a trade to trade Pablo to Dark Zero for a player I won't mention, and Pablo didn't want to play for Dark Zero, so that didn't happen. So Pablo leaving was actually a very real possibility. I even messaged Newers, he had not signed with OXG. I messaged Newers, and it was for Pablo, and Newers had like literally signed that day with OXG. So then we ended up like having a big discussion with Pablo, and obviously we reached a contract agreement, and now he's signed here through forever. He'll probably be a Sonic for the end of the game. But yeah, that was, he may have been doing that to get more money, which worked out, I guess, for him. But that was also like a very real possibility that was going to happen, because I think we even reached out to SSG and offered Pablo for Fultz or Hot and Cold at that time. I'm almost positive we did. And you guys said no.
Thing. Well, because at that time I also knew that like his contract was over. So I was like, why do we trade for someone we can just get? Like it didn't. So yeah, no, those things like definitely did happen. But yeah, so once he found out that it did happen, I think with me taking away IGLing from him, and then like we had this altercation where I was upset that he like couldn't have a full conversation with me. Then I'm like looking at Grixer. I think that it really kind of did hurt any chance of him like really feeling like he was part of the team. And I think that's something that like I think most people will always say about SSG is we have like a hardcore family like philosophy. And like anytime we're at events, all of us go eat together. Anytime that we're like outside of the game, we're watching movies together, we're playing games together, we're watching shows together. We like, we're playing ping pong, and we're all like laughing and cheering like while other people are playing ping pong. Like we are insanely close. And when you have like a team like that, but then they do you wrong, kind of like where he's seeing it from, I can see where he kind of believed that like what we were doing was all bullshit, and I think it did hurt his ability to really kind of mold with the team after that. And I think that's like what really started causing our like huge defensive problems like in stage 2, was because for that stage it was a problem. And then I did say like I did feel like he was starting to recluse, and he didn't like really feel like he was a part of us, and we needed to make a replacement. But it was like the same conversation that I just had with Rampy. It was like, for who? Because Alex is such a good player, and like you can't just replace him with like anyone. But we like, it was like, to me, I was trying to tell the team like we need to just like probably replace him for anyone and try to train that person to be as good as they can be, because we're losing out on the mental side. Like you guys don't want to work together. Like we can't win if you guys don't want to work together. And it just wasn't seen until like the Asian thing happened. It really kind of rocked him a lot, and he didn't play good in the SQ game against you guys on Border, or the Parabella game, which was the day after in Sky. And then after that, the team had a meeting, and it was that he was getting replaced. That was the first time that the team agreed with me that he needed to be replaced, was that time at stage 2. The only person that was really like before that was me back in stage 1. So like I had a differing view than the team pretty much the whole time until then everyone kind of like was like, oh, I get it now. And then that's when like it like really happened.
And so then that obviously led you guys to eventually picking up Xander and having a pretty solid stage 3 where you ended up in Sweden. and I know there are some things regarding Sweden you wanted to talk about, so we can dive into the Sweden conversation.
Yeah, I would say like just a little bit that stage,
Hmm.
we were 61% on attack and 71% on defense.
Yeah,
So like solid season, another very
definitely.
very solid season from all of us as a team. You wouldn't think that like a team like that would like necessarily implode, you know? Like it
Mm.
seemed like there was like a bright future for all of it. The first thing that I have a huge problem with, and that I didn't even realize that was going to happen to us, was that the major format was different than the SI format that we just played in. And that is that in groups
Hmm.
at Sweden, the team with the best round differential got to go to groups. But at SI, the team with the
So head to head.
best head to head got out and went to groups, which is why like we didn't even matter how we played the last games at SI. Elevate was already eliminated because we all the teams beat Elevate. So then
Right.
Elevate was out. It didn't matter what round differential was. I don't even know what our group round differential was, but it was probably a bit. It was probably ass. It was probably like
I
historically
think
one of the
I
worst
remember
ever.
Yardy saying that you guys had the worst like round differential of any of the teams, even the ones that were like eliminated. So
Yeah,
like, yeah, I think your round differential is pretty bad.
awful. But I mean, I think we what I wanted to do with that team, like the plans I had, it showed in stage 3 that they worked, right? Like
Hmm.
huge numbers, way above 50% on both sides. Like if you're above 50% on both sides, you are winning almost every game. Like you can't lose if you're above 50% on both sides. That's just math.
Right.
So, you know, and then we basically lose out on BDS on a technicality and they win the whole event.
Yeah.
Like we should have been the team that went past. If that's how the SI format is, that should be how all majors are. They should be the exact same. And we would have got out of groups and not BDS. Like there
Yeah, I
was
agree.
even people on players on BDS who were DMing me afterwards saying that they thought we should have been going through and not them because they thought that we were that good. And I even think like we should have probably ended up winning round differential the first time we played. We should have at least gone to OT and it would have helped us. And then it,
Well, you
you know,
guys still kind of had it in your own hands, right? Didn't you
we
just need to
did.
beat one of the APAC teams like 7-4 or something,
Yeah, it was
and you
7-4,
guys
and
went too close with them?
we were 6-3 on bank, and we just like threw a bunch of rounds in a row, and then we ended up losing it. So we did have a
Yeah.
chance to be, and there was like an open area round that was like a freebie that we threw. That was like one of
Hmm.
the first ones. So like it was still like something that we could have even done anyway, but like it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
Um, so with all that being said, I do think that like what we were doing was working and how I wanted to play was working. But that was the first time ever as a coach at a major event I got grouped.
Yeah.
Through all of my I like in 2 days it would be 5 years of me coaching for SSG if I would have still made it. The whole
Mhm.
time I was playing in major events, I had made every groups or I'd made every playoffs until Sweden. And I'd even say on a technicality, it should have been like something that we made as well. So post team talks after that, they were like very knee jerk reactions. It was, we have to completely change everything we're doing. We're like not good enough. Like we have to change to a different attacking play style.
Was this in
Um,
reaction to like you guys had W7M in your group, right? And they kind of like I don't want to say like smoked you, but they
yeah.
like you guys weren't that competitive with them.
No. And it
Um,
was. I would say mostly the games versus W7M. It was like their lurk, slow play pressure is like
mm,
what we wanted to emulate and do, which to me, in opinion, is still structured.
yeah.
Like I was saying earlier with that OXG chalet attack, like they still do things together, even though they're separated. Things are timed
Well,
correctly based
what's
on.
interesting is W7M are also traditionally a team that are actually like pretty average on attack, but they're just like insane on defense.
That's true. And I would say, like, in general, that's like really what we were looking like. But
Mm.
like, if you are so good at like working together on defense, like you really only need to get to 2 attacks, maybe 3 attacks, like is
Right.
good. And then you just win the game on defense, which I think is a way that generally a structured team would play right now. Like you're not going to win a ton of attacks because teams will come at you and fly at you, and that will create problems. But as long as you're able to work together and find a way to win 3 rounds, now those like crazy plays, like on defense, it's a lot easier to control. They got to
Mm.
fly at you, and you can have your feet planted, and you can kill them as they come at you, and it's a lot easier on that side. But yeah, so after that event also, I had a solo talk with Bosco. It had been like now January all the way to I would say March to November. He had been the IGL, and I had told him that I still had a lot of faith in him. We had the crazy attack percentage in stage 2, and then with Yeti, like I said, in stage 3 it was 61%. Like we still were having problems dealing with teams internationally. Like, but like our ideas were there. We just had to create ideas that would work for teams that we were not comfortable with. That was like the big thing. But I
Mm.
could tell with talking to Bosco then, like he was starting to think like, do I still have like what it takes to play? Because it was really more of like a conversation where it felt like he was looking for confidence from me as a coach. And so like I doubled down and I told him I believed in him 100%. Like he was doing the right things. We were good. It was just like little things and like individual mistakes that were plaguing our rounds and making it hard to guarantee us getting those like 3 attack wins. So with all of that being said, then we left Sweden and then we kind of enter in the break of December.
So, and again, we've kind of talked about this already, but there's like a reoccurring theme almost of outside of the Troy era of SSG, of the team just struggling when you get internationally in terms of like having the same attacking prowess. Would you say that it's possible that um, the philosophy or the playstyle is maybe a problem internationally, and that just having Troy, who's arguably the best IGL Siege has ever had, for that year and a half or however long it was, like solved a lot of those issues because Troy's like he was able to make calls that a normal player is not going to be able to make to like save some of the problems? Or do you still think that like if the team was able to just play the same, if they could get the same level of coordination or even confidence that they were getting within the region, that you still have absolute faith that this play style can work, whether it's with Troy or Bosco or Skies or anybody else, if the team was committing to playing that same exact way internationally?
Yeah, like I said, like it does take I would say like most of international play does take a team playing together for a long time, learning how to deal with problems that they're not accustomed to. Because, like I said, like
Mm.
you only scrim regionally, and
Right.
you like then become like, oh, hey, these attacks that we're doing are nasty. But like they're only really nasty against the teams that you're playing regionally, because we all inherently will play the things the same way. Like you'll literally throw a drone in, and you'll see there's like one of I would say 4 defenses that the team is doing. Like I would even say maybe 3 like regionally. Like you can almost like see 1 or 2 walls, and then like you know exactly what the team is set up is going to be, so it's very easy. But then like every region has their own meta, so like you're coming across problems that you've never seen before, and you have to be able to have some sort of willingness to take risks to be able to like kind of beat some of those problems. But I don't believe that like saying that you, because I do believe that you guys are among the structured teams in North America. I would say you're the most loose structured team behind like us and DZ. But like I would say that you guys are still coordinated with drones, making plans and moving forward. Like
Hmm.
the way that the SSG like attacked way back in the day, that's not even how we were playing anymore. Like we were more playing with the attempt of playing like how you guys were playing, like more loose. The only problem was, and I will talk about this, was that we were very good at doing it in scrims. We were bad about doing it in matches.
Hmm.
And we over time, in my opinion, became a scrim team. We were good with making risks when it didn't have a lot on the line, but like we didn't want to do those things when like it could eventually become a problem. And then we weren't taking it would just become this thing where I was like, well, SSG's like not even moving. It was like we saw the problems that were in front of us, but we were afraid to take them alone. No one would like help and rotate to like solve the problem. Then the whole round would go away. And then it was like, hey guys, only 50 seconds left. We got to make a move. Then everyone would run in and they would die to crosses because now, it's taken us 2 minutes, 10 seconds to be able to come up with a plan. Like the defense knows if you're a good team, it only takes you probably 30 seconds to figure out what the attack is doing. But we sit there for a minute and 30 seconds, like everyone is moved around and they're ready for you. Then you run in and you all die and you're like, all right, let's do that the next round. And that's like kind of what it looked like. But that's not how it looked in scrims.
Right.
There was times like, and I don't know how much like scrims you watch, but in December and January, there were times when we would scrim even you guys and we would slaughter you. And then there's times where we would scrim you and you guys would blow us out of the water. It wasn't even close. So it was like we had a big problem with consistency and trying to be aggressive. And like the main problem, in my opinion, was like being able to communicate and work together and know when you need to drop your responsibility to make sure that you can help someone else get in the map, or like, oh, hey, I see this play. I need a drone at my feet so I can go. There would be no drone that would ever show up. And that's like
Yeah.
constantly like problems that I was like continuously bringing up that it just didn't work. But in these post talks in Sweden, we were like, we need to be this new team. We need to do this. We need to do this. And like, we're wanting to change everything. And I was trying to like kind of caution them that like it didn't have to change that much. We just had to be more aware of like what everyone was doing and not tunnel vision on our own problems as much and like work as a team. So there was like that was when the big shift in what I wanted to do versus I'd say what the team like voted on. And I was 100% okay with it. I
Hmm.
agreed in the end. I just like kind of like showed my caution to it. And then I said, if we're going to do this, we have to go all in. We have to like 100% all be down for it, all agree to it. And we have to like, cause like I said, that play style, you have to take more risks. So if someone was going to make a mistake, it's not like, hey man, like why'd you die there? Like it with that play style, there's just a lot more risk you're taking that's a little bit more solo. And we have to make sure that we're making plays off of other people's risks so that if they die, we can get like two back. Like that guy's running in like double, then we're gonna jump in radio and we're gonna kill the guy fountain and fire. Like maybe the guy double dies, but we kill the guy in fountain and fire and we're fine. Like those
So
kind of things.
they wanted to play the play style that you moved away from Skies for in the past. Basically, it was like a more risk heavy play style where
Yeah.
it's more gun reliant than necessarily just like people being in positions.
Hmm.
And I guess that kind of leads up to the break in December, which is I assume like this period is also when you guys you're preparing for SI quals. Um,
Yeah.
so you can walk us through kind of that period as well, which I believe is like December.
So, like I said, whenever there wasn't matches going on, I came home. So we
Hmm.
all flew back to Sweden. We had like a team talk. Got a call from the org. Like they were obviously pretty worried because, like I said, that was the first time ever we'd been grouped. So
Yeah.
I was getting calls like, "What happened? Like, what's going on? Like, this isn't reaching our expectations," which is totally fair from the org side. Just trying to figure out like what's the next step to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Hmm.
And through that conversation, I explained to them about the head to head and the round differential thing and how BDS won. Because I would say at first they were a little bit more upset until BDS won the whole thing. And then it was like, okay, like it makes a little bit more sense. W7M was like a top four team and BDS won it. Those were the two teams that got out in your group. Like it's not like,
You
a
didn't
big
lose to
red
the team that
flag.
just made it out and then lose immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, in that phone call, I was told there would be no changes made, which is like I think fine. So then we had like a talk with the whole team the night before I left. I told them like, hey, I know like always with the rosters unlocking, people freak out. Like I want you guys, no one to worry. We're not making any changes, and we weren't looking at anyone like during that time or anything.
I think we
Um,
actually called you during this period, or SSG, and asked if you guys wanted cans in because you had just had so much success with Yeti. I
yeah.
thought like maybe you want to double down on Sonic's players, but
Well, that
Yeah.
was like something that we were doing too, that honestly, deep down in the back of my mind was kind of like worrying me, was that we were picking up players from teams that like weren't successful and then trying to make a successful team. That was
Mm.
something that I thought about. Didn't really like express to anyone, but hot and cold was like DZ felt like they couldn't win with him and they end up winning a major, but we picked him up. And then you guys are like, I would say, getting really close to being something special. And you dropped Xander and we picked him up. So it was like we're picking up people's like leftovers, but trying to be better than the teams that we dropped them from. Like to me, at least, just generally as a competitor, it is a little bit of a troll. Like
Mm.
it doesn't make full sense. Like it almost made more sense to me in some light to find a new Fultz or Rampy and make another like young team that's like really strong and can like move forward into the future with like a complete like without any of the like veteran, because like players who have played for a long time, they eventually start thinking that they know more than the coach does and they don't need to be coached as much
Yeah.
just naturally. And that was something that was beginning to be a problem, like you said, like, or that you're at least hearing from me, is I said one thing, team wanted to do another thing, so I didn't get to say. Like that is something that happened a lot in 2022, but I will say that just in general it's also something that I was okay with. I don't want it
Mm.
to seem like it's like I'm blaming it on everyone else, because like that is what we created at SSG. We wanted to be a family. I wanted everyone to always be around. I wanted everyone to always have a say. But I will say in 2018, 2019, and 2020, when I said things, it was what it was going to be. Whether
Right.
like people agreed with me or not, they're like, okay, if this is what Lycan thinks is best, we're going to do it. And
Mm.
that stopped becoming a thing, because people like had been around for so long, they had their own opinions, and they kind of like started wanting to have it done the way that they wanted it to be done, not necessarily how their coach wanted it to be done. And I think that did like probably cause problems internally. I wouldn't say that they were like the biggest reasons why anything happened, but it is a factor in it all, I think. But yeah, I go on to break, and I got a call, or it was a message in WhatsApp for in the team's WhatsApp, like that. Basically, everyone had talked,
Yeah.
and Yeti was taking over the defensive
Talked
role.
without you. They talked without you.
No, they had talked about like, so what I'm assuming happened, and I don't know,
Uh huh.
and other
Okay.
people would have to like talk about it, is that Bosco, I had this solo talk with Bosco that I talked about, where he was it looked like to me that he wanted confidence. He wanted people to tell him like, you're doing the right things, we're on the right path, like you're the guy that needs to be calling. And I think that after I had that conversation with him and I told him that I had confidence in him, he wanted to have that same talk with the team. He wanted to hear not just the confidence from me, but the confidence from the players. And he brought up that he was like really kind of like, having the struggles or whatever. And somehow through it all, basically Yeti ends up with the defenses. And at least to me, which I don't have like a huge problem with, but to me, it was like Bosco was reaching out for confidence. And then the team was like, yeah, you know what? You're right to doubt yourself. Let's give it to someone else. So, like, it did, I think, in a way, kind of chip at him a little bit. Cause, like, I think he was more just like looking to make sure everyone believed in him. And that didn't happen. Um, Defenses in stage 3 were 71%, like I said. And I think like near the end, you can even contribute like some sort of point to this, but defense was the only thing that we could do. So
Yeah.
like, to
100%.
me, to me, if we had any sort of worry about how Bosco was calling, it made no sense that it came on defense. But I was put in a weird position because I was told after all the one-on-one talks, they like, how teams are after like events, they're all talking to each other like one-on-one, like, hey, are we doing this, are we doing that, like what do you think we should do, role changes, like all that stuff happens with every team. And I was the last one to hear about it. What the decision was that Yeti
Mm.
was taking over defenses. Now, I will say that my decision was that I was like, okay, Sander wants to do it. My biggest problem was that it was like not, I was not part of the decision at all. And I was pretty hard on Yeti about the fact that I found out about it last. When I'm the head coach, I should be a part of the whole conversation, at least have an opinion on it. But my problem was with what happened with Alex in January, where I stripped him of his IGL, and I felt like it broke his trust in me and the team. When I'm told that someone else is now being taken over for defenses, I just immediately didn't want to judge. I didn't want to judge it at all because I didn't want Xander to feel like I had no faith in him, which at the
Mm.
time I didn't anyway. But like I did, I thought that Bosco was doing fine, and I thought there was no point to change anything. But I also didn't want to tell Yeti that he couldn't have it and to give it back to Bosco.
What was the like idea behind switching who calls defenses, like to be more aggressive?
So I know that there was one play in general, which I do think that this did because it was part of the team talks. There was a bank defense round in the Sweden major, and it was against like that team that we were supposed to beat.
Fury.
So yeah, it was when we were like 6-3. It was like when we still had a chance, and Bosco had called for it was either the soft roam or for the full turtle. I don't remember. Basically a passive roam or like a completely passive turtle setup. And Yeti said afterwards, like we had been beating them on the entries. We should have done a hard roam and stayed aggressive, which I do think I agree with him. And Bosco even agreed with him afterwards. That would have been the better call. And it was a mistake to make that call. So it was more of like trying to get Bosco away about having to worry about every round what strat to do and to try to just give it to someone else. So not necessarily that it would be that the defenses would be more aggressive, but that like there would be more like intention and focus on what the strat was going to do.
Okay.
So
I mean, to be fair, it's also kind of like very knee jerky to make that decision because of like one round. Because everybody's, and I'm sure there's more to it than one round, but like everybody makes bad calls. That's kind of like, that's why having a good IGL is important. But even the best IGLs are going to make bad calls sometimes. You just have to live with it.
I agree, which is why I like tried to like make sure that he knew that I had a lot of confidence in him. But yeah, that happened with the team, and through December, it got to a point where our defenses tanked in scrims way below. It was like almost below 40%. And I had made a statement, and then Luke backed me up, and then Yeti gave the defenses back to Bosco. So there was just a short time in December where like that all had happened. And I even think maybe it was like the first week of January, but it was basically 2 weeks before the quals. Like we had Bosco back on shot calling both attack and defense.
Okay.
But yeah, so in December too, the big thing was we were trying to create this new play style where we were going to be very aggressive. We were going to try to find spots to get in the map. We were going to try to like have people making plays off those aggressive plays, to making sure that it's not just like a solo guy running in and dying, and then a solo guy running in and dying, and then like you're like essentially sending players to the gauntlet. Go try to kill as many as you can. Go try to kill as many as you can. But I will say, at least at first, that's really what it was. And we were trying to hone it and make it like better. And that's why I think our consistency was struggling, was because there was some days where it was like, it felt like everything was on. And then there was other days where it was like, like we don't know what we're doing, which is when I think people really started calling us like a scrim team. Cause that before was never a thing you'd ever hear about SSG being a scrim team. But I do think it was very warranted in December and January, because there was just some days where we'd show up and it was nuts, and there's some days that we'd show up and it was ass. And I would say more often than not in those matches and through the quals and through SI, we were completely absent with like how we were attacking. The hardest thing about like doing that play style is that you have to have insanely good communication, you have to have good drones, good vision, and you have to know where the true problems lie within the attack, and then you have to strike together. We had people who were tunneling on things that didn't matter. We had people who were wanting to frag chase people that were way off, like in nowhere land, didn't matter, that we could just hold them off for when they came back. Like we just had a lot of problems that I would say like a general Challenger League team would have, or like a bottom 4 Pro League team would have, was what we turned into. And we had players that were not that caliber. We had all very good players, but it was that we like couldn't communicate to a point that like we kind of fell off.
So you guys like
very
essentially
hard.
like what it sounds like is you guys saw an aggressive meta maybe some of it's inspired by past teams, even like the playstyle you want. And rather than stick to the playstyle that the players were comfortable with, you wanted to switch to this more aggressive playstyle. But you don't like. I've always said this is like you can't teach a passive player to be aggressive. They're just a passive player. Like that's just who they are. And you can't like an aggressive player is aggressive. Like Rexon, for example.
Yeah.
Like he's just gonna run at you, and you know he's gonna run at you, and you just have to hope you win the fight against him.
Yeah.
You like trying to make and I'm not necessarily saying that all the players on SSG are passive, but there's a long history of SSG being on more of the passive side.
Yeah.
And then trying to switch all these guys to all of a sudden you're trying to play like super fast paced Sonics, W7M, whatever kind of style.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to learn how to play like that, and that's if you even have the players who can play like that.
I agree. And I mean, that's like the conversation. I wouldn't say that everyone was like against me in the room when we were like waiting for our flight in Sweden. It wasn't really like that, but it was to an extent. I was saying I didn't think that we should do it. It didn't make sense. At least like I literally picked up Fultz from the very beginning, and I taught him how to play this certain way of Siege. You know, Rampy, same case from the very beginning. And I would say Bosco, like if you were to rank like smokes or whatever, Bosco is one of the most passive, methodical smokes ever. Like there might be some that you would say are better or worse or whatever. I would say some like Alamo, take for example, he played or Kino. They play smoke so different than how Bosco plays smoke. He's very passive, and everything he does, like it is like he's like trying to judge whether it's a right idea or wrong idea. There are some smokes that are like, I got the pump, I'm going to run at you. Like you're going to die. That's just not him. So I agree. Like that's the things I was saying. I was like, I don't think like this is what we should do, but it was being argued heavily against me. And obviously very knee jerk because like for the first time ever, we had been like out of groups. So it was something that it seemed like, hey, we just need to do something different. And this is what a lot of teams are doing. So let's just do it, you know? Yeah. And as the coach, you know, I was like, okay, I can see a meta shift. I can get where the aggression does work. Like I'm a very logical person. I can see other people doing it. So if you guys are all telling me like this is the only that way that you want to play, I have to try to like see if this is something that like can make it work for the rest of us, you know? And we're honestly giving it like our best go. But I mean, when we started scrimming, it was like not good at all. And our defenses were also bad. I would say most of the time in December was pretty dark as far as like scrim results were going. Not mental at all. I would say like just to like put it out there too. Having Yeti on your team, it's very difficult to have a bad mental. He's like literally one of the best people I've ever met as far as like when he knows like someone's quiet or like when he knows like something's getting to someone, he will like just make a comment that'll make him laugh. Or
yeah,
like
I mean, Yeti has the amount of energy that Yeti as a person has is like a normal like 20 people. Like he's definitely a great like vibes kind of player for your team.
Yeah. So like when I say they were dark, it was like, oh hey guys, we just got 8-4-9-3-9-3. Great scrim, you know?
Yeah.
Like it was like we were getting shit on. But like I wouldn't say that people were that like negative or anything towards each other. That's not really like what it was, but it was just that like what we were trying to do was not working, and it wasn't working like at an extreme rate. It wasn't just like 5-7s, it was like 3-9s.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when for the first time ever and I've ever coached that I had came up with this idea, because I did believe that like if you truly want to make something like this work, you have to not be wanting to do all of these individual things on your own. Like a lot of the ideas, if you want it to be a team that's successful, even though you're aggressive, your ideas have to play off of other people. Because I do think like that is why Liquid has always struggled, is that they're an insane team where they can catch you off guard and they can play like aggressive. But once they play against a good team in a late run who's seen a lot of their maps, they can stop all of it, because all it takes is for just like Nesk or Paula to not have one good game. and they have nothing to fall back on. They have no base. So then they lose and they never win. But it's not because they're bad players. It's because they don't really believe that they have to work together to find wins. They believe like, I'm just going to put up 15 kills. He's going to put up 16 kills and you're all just going to die. Well,
Yeah.
eventually there's going to be a game where that doesn't happen and then you lose and you're out. So I was really trying to like tell them and sell them, if we're going to do this play style and we're going to really believe in it, we have to be more of a team. We have to be trying to help each other. And so the Redeem team had came out like, I'm actually not sure if it came out like close in December, but it's when I found it for the first time. It started playing on my Netflix by accident while I was getting the kids ready for school. And my oldest son is like huge into sports, so he's asking me a ton of questions about all those players because I've been a huge sports guy my whole life. So I was telling him about, oh, these guys were played when I was like a kid. I loved these guys, and then so I sat down and I watched the whole thing, and I was like very moved by it. It's a bunch of all-star players, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, like all these guys, but they were known kind of like Americans are known for just being all stars, but not being teammates. Like, we're just going to like show out and like, hopefully we put up more points than you. And they were getting beat by teams like Argentina and like stuff like that, because those teams played together for a long time. They had all plays and they all worked together. And that was like what I really felt like was like our biggest problem. We had tons of star power, but we didn't want to work together. We wanted to just do our own things. And we thought that being aggressive meant that I'm just going to walk through lobby on bank and I'm just going to pick up like 2 kills on people that are like, not ready for me. And if I die, then, well, hopefully you guys got the rest of it. Good luck. Because that's what it was for us, was like, it was like we're sending people to the gauntlet one by one trying to make plays, and no one was doing a play that really went off of someone else's play. So the Redeem team, I watched the video 5 times and I took a ton of notes. And then I made the whole team sit down. I canceled practice and we watched the movie all together. Like, this is while I'm at home. So they're all in the prac room. I'm back home and we're all watching it at the same time. We all started at the same time. I told none of them they were allowed to talk through the whole movie. Once it starts, all of you mute. We're not talking. Afterwards, I'm going to say a piece and then I can tell you when to unmute. And I had like a 30-minute presentation afterwards where I had a bunch of notes and I told them how I thought it related to me, how I thought it related to them, how I thought it related to us as a team, and how we can use it to move forward and be better as a team. And everyone separately was messaging me afterwards saying how they thought it was like a really good thing what we did and it was going to be huge. And I felt like a sigh of relief afterwards from like all the scrims that we had. And I will say, for a week the scrims were very good.
Yeah.
But it was about just a week that they were good. So it was like the motivation from it was there, but it was like it didn't last very long. And then people started falling back into the, I'm doing this. Like it was like we had decided like, hey, we're going to do all these new ideas. We're going to do all these new things. And then, once those things work, okay, now that's what I do all the time from now on. Like, we kept falling back into this thing where it was like, we're not flexible anymore. Like I did this one thing this one time. Now I want to do it every time we do this strat. And it was like, it became something that it shouldn't be if we're going to truly be flexible, But that was the first time ever as a coach I felt like I had to motivate the team from an outside source, like a movie. I'd never done that before. I did think it went pretty well, but I think it's like pretty alarming that I had to even do it in the first place. Because
I'm never a fan of, like, in my opinion, especially in esports, like, I feel like all of the players should be independently motivated or motivated as a team to win. And to be playing their best and trying to figure out what's going on, because esports is a job. I had like kind of a tweet about this, kind of saying like, at least in Rainbow Six, maybe in like a couple of games there's a chance where you make like life-changing money, but in Rainbow Six, like, your salary is like a pretty normal salary for most people. Obviously you can win a lot of money, but very few people do. Like, this is just like, it's a normal job, but the thing about his esports is like if you get benched or you get cut, like that's it. Like it's very hard to get a spot back unless you are
Yeah.
like a very legacy player, and your pay is not the same on a bench. You can just be released a lot of the time, and you know they don't owe you anything, or maybe they owe you like $1,000, couple $1,000, and that's it. Like esports is a business where if you are on a pro team, it is very important that you remain on your pro level and that you are continuously trying to improve and like motivate yourself, because there are a ton of people who are waiting to take your spot, and they'll be less expensive from you and they'll be more motivated than you. So it's
Yeah.
like I don't like the idea of like having to motivate the team. Like I like the team just always seeming like they're trying to get better, like they want to improve, and not just be like, well, another day of scrims, let's go get shit on kind of thing. Like, not that that's necessarily the case, but that would be like super alarming to me about the team mentality.
Yeah, which is, I mean, we see it the exact same way in that case. Like I said, I never thought I needed to do it ever. And when I saw the movie for the first time, I thought to myself, I have to do this. Like that's how bad it was.
Mm,
And so, yeah, it was very alarming to me. It did feel like it was received well, so that was like something that was exciting, but it didn't feel like it really lasted that long. The excitement. I'll just like say a note as well too, is that I would say basically since we like won SI and we did get kind of paid more, like my ability and like openness to be around all day was like pretty much at like an insane amount. I told the guys like we would scrim once at noon and once at 4 for Pacific, and I told them I'm up and the boys, like if I'm home, the boys are on the bus by 8:30 Central, and I'm free for anyone who wants to VOD review the day before, like the previous day's scrim, and I will watch it all the way up until scrims. I am free after if you want to go over it, same as well. I was available at all times. There was a 2 week period where Bosco and Matt, I would think in stage three, where that worked with me like for 2 weeks straight, trying to like really work how they wanted to do attacks. Other
mm.
than that, it was usually only Rampy once or twice a week that would use that. Other than that, no one ever like tried to use that time to better themselves, which I do
Do you
think.
think that that's also potentially on you to like schedule times with players? Like, could you have done that, or did you want it to be like kind of, if they think they need the help, they can ask for it, but I'm not going to like go, necessarily force them to help if they don't want it.
Yeah, so I think at least what you were saying before of the same mentality, I want the people that work for me to be motivated, self-motivated people. I
Hmm.
think the people who are, because I used to hear all the time from like the old DZ days how like early they had to be up, they had long days, they would burn out. Like I didn't want to burn out players, so I needed to know when you were willing to do it and when you were not willing to do it. I always have a saying too that I mess with my wife about, because my wife is a math teacher, and I always tell her, I am not a teacher, I am a coach. And there is a clear difference between the two. And I don't think people really realize what it is. A coach, like I'm going to tell you what you need to do to get better. And I expect you to get better after what I said. You need to take my notes and you need to figure out how to do it. And if you don't know, you need to come to me and we will figure it out. A teacher has to teach people even if they don't want to be in the class. They still need to make sure everyone passes all the state exams. Like they still need to go through all of this. I am not a teacher. I want people who are self motivated. And I don't see how in esports, if this is your dream and passion, that you can't come to me when you know you need it. And if you don't think that you need it, and I do, and you're not coming to me, then you're gone. I can find a new person who will want to do it. So that's
Right.
kind of like my philosophy. Yeah, I probably could have or should have at certain times done that with players, but that's like not how I operate as a person. Like I
Mm.
want you to want to get better yourself, because I do believe that if I force you to do it, then I'm like kind of then it's like I gotta go like talk to Lycan. Like I want you
Right.
to like want to do it because then I think that's the most productive and you'll get more out of it.
Okay. And so, following the redeem team and the like, I guess the scrims following that, I assume leads up to Christmas break where you guys come back for January and
Yeah.
you get back going for leading up to SI. When you come back for January, are your practices like, are you still trying to play this play style? Or are you reverting back to the more SSG style attack? Like what transpired in January leading up to I guess invite quals, which obviously you guys ended up winning.
Yeah, so I will say that I think a comment should just be made in general because there was a comment made that we were trying to revert back to old SSG ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in Yeti's like post interview, I don't think that there's anyone else on the team that you can find that would agree to the statement that he made.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was personally trying to cope with just like what happened, which I think is fair and fine. But at no time since we had Yeti was it possible for us to play like old SSG. Even in stage 3, we were not playing like old SSG. And I know, like, as someone who was never on that team like Yeti, he wouldn't know exactly what it felt like. But we picked up Yeti to be our flank watch, and
Yeah.
our flank watch was Matt. Yeti would not watch flank, and it's not like he was like against it, but like he was so sold on the fact that he had to be a lurker, which he was good at and he did well at. But like the most that Yeti would watch flanks, honestly, was when he was dead on camps. So like it was just like pretty much impossible to say that we were trying to be old SSG. Now I will say it did feel like or look like it because we would never enter the building. It took us forever to do anything and then we would lose the round. But it like none of the attacks were in a way where we would get map control. We'd set a flank watch. We'd continue to push forward with an attack. We'd kill people on the flank and then we'd execute on site, which you can also agree that's how we used to play old SSG. We were not playing that way. It was the way that we were playing was we would lurk around and trying to find ways to get into building. There would be players like the way that you had to play a defense was look for ways to get kills. That's like the main way to like deal with the fact that with attacker repick, attacks can literally do whatever they want. So as a defender, you have to stop that at the front. So we would try to find ways to lurk in the building, and there would be people there on every way, and we wouldn't know how to work with each other to get map control. That was our problem. But yeah, the first couple practices when we showed up, we came back like January 3rd, and we were coming back January 3rd with a full like double scrimming every day, really prepping. Like during the
Mm-hmm.
break, it was we had 2 days off, and most days was only a single scrim. So while the scrims weren't going well, there was a lot of like excuses that were like out of the game that were being brought up. I'm not on my normal scrim setup. Like I'm hanging out with family all day. My mental's not like fully there. We're only single scrimming, so like we're not really kind of warming up enough. There was a lot of like outside excuses that were being used to why like the attacks weren't working yet. So then when we got into January 3rd and 4th, and we had double practices. Everyone was back at the house in the prac room, and the scrims were awful. And if I remember right, I don't 100% remember, but I'm pretty sure they were like against CL and Mexican Pro League teams.
Yeah.
Like they were not against all-star teams, and we were not doing well against any of them. For the first time ever, coaching, this is the second time I'm saying that. For the first time ever as coaching, I had to reach out to SSG and I talked to the GM battalion and I said, I need a flight out to Vegas immediately. If we're going to actually make SI, because my flight was like for the 14th or the 15th, it was a week before, whatever, the
Mm-hmm.
quals. And I felt bad because they had already paid for it. I was like, I need you to change that ticket and I need to get there the soonest you can get me there, or we are not going to make SI. And they did, which huge shout out to SSG. SSG, you guys, like, I know everyone knows this, but I've always said good things about them all the time because they were
Mm-hmm.
always there when I needed them the most. And they like provided me with a plane ticket and I flew out 2 days later. And I was with the team. And that next week of practice I had with them was honestly lights out. And Luke used to always joke about this. It was like, sometimes we'd have like some struggles before stages or whatever. But when I showed up the next day, like that week, practice would be insane. He used to always joke with me while they were scrimming. He'd be like an effect. Like in because like every time I showed up, like we would, it was like everything was clicking, everything was on, like we were all together as a team and we were nailing it. And that week of practice was just like that. And I think that's when people really started talking about us being a scrim team, because that's when I was hearing it a lot for the first time from other people. Was like all of a sudden, like we were getting shit on all through December and the first week of January. Now we're good. Like, where is this coming from SSG? And it sucked because that weekend I think it was all of us but Rampy got sick, like pretty sick, like fevers, like it was bad, and we were trying to play through it, and then all of a sudden it was like we kind of reverted, and like we were not doing what we were doing the week before.
Right.
So there was like 3 or 4 days before the SI quals where I was trying to be like, remember what we were doing last week. Remember how we were communicating with each other. Remember how we were working with each other. That's how it has to be if we're going to make this work. And that first day of SI quals it was embarrassing. Like I do like no kind of diss to RTV. I thought RTV probably will go down as one of the best CL teams to ever be in North America. Like they were very dominant. I felt like they easily, some of the people on that roster could take over bottom pro league team players. Like they were like, just with how good and how much that team worked together, like they would
Mhm.
actually find players, pinch players, and then nade the player out. Like you don't see that out of CL like players. Like if they pinch a player, eventually one of them is running at them and just trying to kill him by himself. Like
Yeah.
RTV was a team that actually used utility to get kills and are working together, you know. And they were like a coordinated team and not just like an aggressive, like a bunch of young gunners type of thing. So I had a lot of respect for them, but I didn't think that by any means it was a team that should have beat us.
Mhm.
Like I just think they should have given us problems, and that was it. So we lose to them, and then we go last round map 3 versus Mirage, and we almost lose the whole thing. And that night, after obviously we celebrated, which I think is rightfully so. Anytime you win, you have to at least find ways to like find comfort in things that go well. We had like some serious talks outside where I pretty much told them that it shouldn't be anywhere near anyone's expectations, and that we shouldn't be happy with where we were. And it was for the first time I had ever told them. I said, you know, all these rumors about us being a scrim team, how we just played today, can you say that they're wrong? You know, I kind of put it into their mind that, like, guys, we can't perform in a match how we're playing in scrims. That's a problem. Like, we
Yeah.
can't move. And yeah, so I kind of like let that resonate with them. And then the next day when we were going to play RTV again and then had to play TSM if we won, in the little prep talk, like we started doing this, like I don't know if people really notice this, but like all through SSG, we never had like a sonic boom or a TSM win. Like we don't have that. Like SSG doesn't have that. So
Yeah.
like we never had anything that like we would huddle and then chant. So we never really did it as a team. But like with Yeti and like his energy, we wanted to start doing it. So like that's like something that we were doing. And
Mhm.
I honestly thought it was great for the team, and like kind of woke them up a little bit, because I did feel like at times with that roster we would start games very slow for no reason. And that was like really helping like kind of get the blood flowing, like chant something together and all that stuff. So I did think like Yeti bringing that over and kind of like having it be something that we were doing was something that was really good for the team just in general. And in that meeting at the beginning, I said, if we can't do this today, we are a scrim team. Are you guys going to change that? And like I had to use that to like
Yeah.
fuel fire for them. And I'm not saying like those words made it so we played well. Like that's not what I'm saying. But it, like I was having to do things I'd never done before to try to find ways to motivate these guys to just be more than just what I was seeing from day to day, which is very alarming. And yeah, we go through that whole day. Obviously, we qual, which is huge. It makes it so like there was never an SI I've ever missed as a coach, which I think
Mm.
is like the accolades that I did like retweet onto the goodbye post. I think it's something crazy to look at and say that's a guy who just got dropped.
Yeah.
to me personally.
I mean, I
Um,
think so. There's a couple of things I just want to ask. So, like, in regards to you using what other people are saying about the team as like a motivating factor, and just like some of the things you've discussed leading up to this. And I think this became more like under scope with the SI listen-ins or whatever. How do you feel about like people saying that you don't bring emotion to your coaching, that you're like more, and I personally don't really think there's anything wrong with like a stoicism or something to a coach. But like, how do you feel about I can't remember, one of the CL casters like made a video or something about it. Maybe it was Cookies.
yeah, it was Cookies.
Okay. And like saying that you don't have, that there's no emotion to your coaching, like you can't necessarily like motivate the players or that kind of thing. Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, and I think that really comes down to like what I've been saying has been like the way that I wanted to approach my team atmosphere was we were a family, you know? And at
Hmm.
least like for me and my family, I am never going to dog you or say something about you in public. Now, I will say, like, and you can ask anyone that was on the team at least 2 times a week through January and at SI, I was outright yelling at them behind the scenes. So
Hmm.
to say that I have no emotion is like seeing just something at face value and just assuming that that's all it is. Now, I don't really hate on Cookies for that because that's how he was as a player too. He was very one dimensional. But like,
Hmm.
I think like the timeout thing was taken way out of context because I even asked my players after people started saying things like, "Do you guys want me to like say that?" And like Bosco immediately said, "No, I would hate that." Like, and Fultz
Yeah.
also said that too. Like, there are some people, and the biggest thing as a coach, and this is like anyone that ever DMs me, what is your biggest advice as a coach? The first thing I always say is you have to know your players because you can't coach everyone the same way. It's literally impossible. You will not be like successful at all. You have to know what drives them. You have to know what like fuels their fire. You have to know like the things that you can say and can't say to them. There are people, and I would even say there are people like Rampy, who if I screamed at him mid match, he would be like, "Let's go! Like I need this. I need this." Like because he's like a fighter kind of mentality. He like drives a lot
Yeah.
on emotion. I'd even say probably Xander would like eat it up too. But I think personally, Hot Fultz and Bosco would not take it well. Like it wouldn't be something that they would appreciate in the moment. So I mean, maybe if I did it once, I think it would be okay. But like if I did it constantly, it would lose its like uh emotion and factor like almost instantly. And like if I know that as a coach, I can't just use that in group stages. I can't just use that like early on. I'm trying to get us as far in the tournament before I use like a weapon like that because I know once I use it, I'm not going to be able to do it again. So yeah, I mean, like I do see what people are saying. Like maybe I should have had more emotion, but I thought at least those guys they know me as well as I know them. They know by the things I was saying. I was like, guys, we gotta go. Like
Yeah.
we're not moving, and like they took it way better than like anyone else that was like listening. They don't understand how a team dynamic works, how my personality is, and I think like what I said to him in response is like the most important thing is that I've been coaching this team for 5 years. I've been coaching, I mean, Rampy, Fultz, and Bosco for years, and I've always acted this way, and we've always been successful. So like now that we're like in the spot where like for the first time ever we look like we are an embarrassment. We don't belong there. You're using this moment to like kind of critique my whole coaching philosophy, I thought
Yeah.
personally was extremely foul.
Right. No, I
So
do think that's a fair point to say, you're going to critique me now when SSG's at the lowest, arguably, since the team has picked up, when it's not like you're necessarily coaching any differently through all the years, like through all the successes. It's just that now that you're losing, now you can say something about it where it's like it wasn't a problem before. So I do think that is fair in terms of like a rebuttal to that. The other thing I had a question about was, You mentioned how you guys picked up Xander to initially play like a flank watch and ended up becoming like a lurker, and Hot and Cold was kind of forced into more of a flank watch. Was that like a problem? Because like from from my perspective, or probably from the fan perspective, like Xander arguably got you guys into the major. Like he had such a strong stage 3, like as you mentioned earlier. And maybe he didn't necessarily play the same internationally, but it wasn't like he was just getting like shit on. Like maybe he's not the MVP of the tournament, but did you feel like that was a problem? Is that like the roles were not being played as intended, even though like individually Yeti was having some success? Was it like at the expense of the team, in your opinion?
Yeah, I agree with that. That's 100% how I feel. And it's not, it sounds bad because it does feel like I'm placing a lot of blame on Yeti himself. But it is like I've been trying to say the whole time. These are all things that the team like slowly agreed upon and were okay with through all of it. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
like some like evil mastermind like threw all our chances away. We were a team and a family, and all of these choices were made by all of us. But Yeti was brought on to be our flank watch because I had, like, if you look at the roles when Dexter came on, it was Dexter at the front, Rampy on two, and then it was Matt on flank, Fultz on flex, and Bosco on hard. And I needed Matt off of flank watch because I didn't feel like it was a good role for him, and I wanted him to go to a flex role where he was playing more of like execute ops that he could work in tandem with Bosco. But Yeti was finding success and wanting to be only purely a lurker. And that made it so Matt then had to be on flank watch. And if Fultz ever died in the round, which he had a lot of inconsistencies like leading up and in SI, if Fultz would die and Matt was on flank watch and lurking and Yeti was lurking around, it was literally Bosco staring at people that Fultz died to. And there
Mm-hmm.
was like, I was like, and I, this is stuff I constantly brought up. Guys, how do we expect to win the round when we look like this? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, there is no way that we can like complement each other and make it look like this. The only way that we can win rounds is for one of you guys to go big. There's no consistency in what we're doing. And that was when we would like have good days where like people were actually working together, and I would say just in general people were shooting. It would make a lot of our problems go away and it would feel like it was working. But then if we showed up and we weren't shooting, I would say just like what I brought up with liquid, if you're not shooting it does not work. And
Right.
like, which is the thing I said from the very beginning. So yeah, I do think like with bringing Yeti on and him kind of creating the new role that he did, and I will say played very well at doing. I want to make sure the whole point of doing this is not to roast a person for whatever. Like,
Right.
it just made it extremely hard for us to win attacking rounds because of how like the team ended up having to deal with like what people wanted to do.
Hmm. Okay. And so, obviously, I think at this point you guys have qualified for SI, and so now you're leading up to SI, and what happened there? If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, after qualifying, I think it was like I was saying, I was like in behind the scenes, I never yelled at the team like when Troy was on the team or when Hot first got on the team, but this team, like with wanting to do this play style, I didn't feel like they were fully invested in doing, which I would say you made a better point than I've ever thought of. Like, like all these passive players, like they're not going to be aggressive when it counts. Like that
Mm-hmm.
is very true, I would say. But like we would see moments of it working in scrims and then moments of it not working in scrims and then also too in matches. So then it was me constantly like telling them, hey, if we're going to do this, like people need to fucking wake up. Like we are not doing the things that we say after scrims, they are not being put in the next day in practice. Like we are right back to being passive, like not working together, not working through problems, tunnel visioning on things that don't matter. Like and it was like everyone, not just one person. Like there was even a round at SI where it was chalet and it was a dining and we did a full clear over top. We had all sun and everything, and we knew there was a flanker, and Rampy was just sledgehammering and trying to like clear out everything. And Fultz is calling this guy in the flank. He's already hit arch close to piano double, and Rampy's still just like slamming. And Fultz had to say, Rampy, stop doing top down. There's a guy in piano. He's flanking. Like that was a problem that we had, was people would literally tunnel out anything else but what they were doing. And that's why I was saying, like, that's a CL problem. That's not a pro league problem. Like, if you can't hear a guy coming on the flank, like that's a very clear problem for a team to have. And that was not just Rampy. I'm telling you, that was just overall. Like if we were like, hey, you're gonna jump in vents, like you're gonna go jail, like we're gonna try to get CC control and lower control early. We're gonna nade the guy up in customs, or sorry, in CC. Like there'd be a guy that'd be at, like, we called it wire door, basically the first door to get into like workshop server. And like there'd be a guy there, and we would not get into vents or West Main for the whole round because there was a guy there. We wouldn't work a way to get around him. We wouldn't work people to like try to push him. It was that one guy's job to try to deal with like that map control. And now, for the first time maybe ever in that strat, when we've done it, there's a problem in front of him, and we have no way to deal with it. And so I'm gonna stand out here. Hopefully he rotates away because he's scared, and then I'll walk in. That was like what it was like. But in scrims, we would just chow that guy and kill him, and then we'd get the map control. So, like, very clear, like it was becoming very clear to me that we had a very big confidence / willingness to be aggressive in an aggressive play style, and it just like was not working for us at all. I mean, that was clear to see. We couldn't win a single attack really. But yeah, after winning the quals, I think people had a huge sigh of relief after me kind of berating them, having to do this motivational thing. Me showing up early, it was like, whew, like we did it. Now we can relax. And
do you think there was like, with all of that going on, do you think there was a worry from the team that like they might lose their jobs over this? Because like you're showing up, you're screaming at them, which they're not used to. Like, do you think there was like real concern, like if we don't win this team is like done?
Oh, 100%. I mean, around this time was when either teams had already announced they were dropping out, or we had heard the rumors that they were going to be gone soon. I would say all of them except pretty much Astralish, which happened super late compared to everyone else. So it was like not only just like they were worried about their job on SSG, but they were worried about SSG like staying in altogether.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, with me showing up early, me like kind of acting like I had never acted before to them, I think it just had a lot of pressure being put on them. But the pressure, there was no way for the pressure to not be there, because like they were not performing individually to make what they wanted to work. So I was constantly pushing, trying to get them to work together to make it work. And I think that got to a point where it's hard to explain. It's like the easiest to explain to another parent. Like if you have that one kid you always have to yell at, like one kid, eventually when you yell at that kid and you raise your voice, he won't flinch anymore. It will get to a point where like that kid is like, nah, dad's yelling again. Because like everyone at a certain spot, like they get accustomed to being yelled at, and then it doesn't matter anymore. And I thought like I'd gotten them there, and then it was like, all right, we did what you wanted. Stop yelling at me. Like that's what it felt like. It felt like when I would yell at them afterwards, it was no longer getting the effect it had before. It was like, I don't need to hear it anymore. Like I did what we needed to do. And that next week was honestly, it felt like we had gone, like we reverted all the way back to December. Like that's what I kept telling to Luke. Like this is like what we were doing in December. It's like not working. Like no one's working together. It's like we felt like we had gotten to a spot where like we kind of proved to ourselves that we did what we needed to do, and we don't even.
Did you like at this point? Did you ever think about bringing up to the team like, hey guys? Luke and you can provide these numbers and just be like, from our eye test, like we need to go back to playing like more structured. Like this is just not how we think. Like our percentages are way down. It's more effective for us to play slower. Like we just need to do this. Or were you just committed to like, this is what they want to do? If they want to run it into the ground in a way, like, okay, we'll commit to this.
So I did have that conversation. I would say it was me, Luke, and Bosco, but I don't remember if all three of us had it at the same time. But constantly when I was at the house and they were in scrims, obviously they can't hear us. I would talk to Luke a lot about that kind of stuff, just while they were scrimming. Um, and Bosco, I think it was either right before the qual or right after the qual. He told me he didn't believe in the system that we were trying to run. He didn't think it worked for us, which I
Mhm.
agree. But the conversation that Bosco and I had after he told me that was, do we think we have enough time to create all new attacks before we have to play at SI? And our conversation basically was that we didn't think we had enough time to make it look good enough, or that we had like the people to be able to do it. Because like, yeah, we were worried about like what would we do, who would be the flank watch, because it wasn't really something that like Xander looked like he was sold on doing. So we were gonna have to put Matt on it. And then
I do think that's interesting because Xander played flank watch for us. Like that was his role on Sonic. So I do think that's interesting that on SSG, um, I guess either the way he learned to play flank watch from us didn't work for you guys, or it was just he was just playing it differently.
well, a funny
Um,
thing that I would say about that is I told him that like I thought he would be good at flank watch because he played flank watch for you guys. And his
mhm.
comment was, not really. I didn't really do that. So
So yeah, he
I
was
thought
like
so,
he
but
would be
like,
our flank. I mean, I think if you would ask anybody who was on that era of Sonic, Xander was the flank watch. Now our flank watch isn't, or I mean, at that time wasn't like a thinking nade flank watch where he
yeah.
just stands there. Like Xander's on the flank, but if he sees the opportunity, he's gonna make the play.
Which honestly, that's what Nade would do. Which I don't think people realize, because like if we're going back, Nade was never watched. But like if like let's take Old Coast for example, and we're doing like a full top clear for a red blue take, right? We do a full top clear, we get all the way over to blue, we have the flank set. Nade's watching from 90, both the white come up and he's watching on a fast drone for a blue come up for the top down guy to be able to react to. If Nade sees no one on the white side, Nade would call for that, and Nade would lurk down white and hit Kitchall to try to kill the guy behind the blue bar. Like Nade would make those plays all the time, but they were never seen because Nade was never shown on cam. But like
Mm-hmm.
we it's not like that he was only just a statue, or that you never could move if you were the flank watch. It
Right.
has to make sense with the team, and as long as you communicate it with other people, it's not a problem.
Did it cross your mind from what you just said, like in regards to your conversation with Bosco? Like for me, obviously I'm not a coach, but like if the IGL or the leader or whatever wants to, if he comes up to me and he says he's not confident in the system we're running, thinks that something else would be better, it's not a question of like, assuming this is after SI quals,
It is, yeah.
it's not a question to me of like if we're gonna change it. It's like, okay, we need to change everything right now. Then like we have, I don't know when quals ended, maybe you had like 2 or 3 weeks, but it's
Yeah,
like
so
I would rather, yeah.
they ended on, I'll look at it because that's probably the easiest thing to do. They ended on the 21st.
So you
And
had like 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks.
yeah, and
So
then we flew out like the first week of February. So we had a week
because
and a
for
half.
me, it would have been like, okay, then we have to put all of our time into this next week and change everything. And we just have to
Mhm.
tell the guys, we don't think this is working. We have all these numbers. If we want any change, because like basically what ended up happening is you didn't change it. You went in SI, and obviously it didn't go great.
Yeah.
Whereas like in reality, if you would have taken that conversation right there and been like, you know what, I 100% agree with you, because you both did agree we need to change it. Let's not say we don't have enough time. Let's just put all of our time into this right now. Houghton, you said Houghton was like involved a lot initially with Bosco making strats. Let's just change this now because that's the only way we're going to have a chance. Right.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, 100% we should have. And that I think is something that I'll take a lot of the blame for. Like I mean, that conversation was very long about like different things we thought that we should be doing right with
Mm-hmm.
what we were doing that weren't happening. And if we could implement new things to make them work, or if we like, like you are saying, like we're double scrimming and trying to like do this. Now, I will say it does seem like it's like we were too lazy in a way, but I will say in the 9 map pool system that like we have now, it is
Yeah.
very hard to have a 1 week turnaround, no matter how committed you are, because at most you can only scrim, I would say, 6 maps. Like I would say maybe you could scrim more than double scrim, but like if you're doing that, like players are exhausted and you're not getting good reps anyway. Like
Yeah.
you get 6 maps a day, which means like after a whole week, you're probably getting 3 playthroughs at most on most maps, two on like the maps that you don't want as much. And that conversation that we had was just like, we don't have enough time to really do it. And we were worried on the whole team being sold on it, and it just felt like we have to try to double down and really fix the problems that we have, because this is what we've been working on for 2 months, rather than scrapping the 2 month projects we had and trying to make something happen in 1 week. And I would say maybe pressure is part of that, wanting to do well at SI and not thinking that like that would have had been enough time to create something that would have done well. I'm not sure, but like with what you're saying, like I do agree. Like it does seem like if we both, like the head coach and the IGL, both believe it, then like maybe we should have just done it and tried it, especially knowing that the result that was created. But like I think the result that was created had to a lot more to do with the team. Like W7M was our second match, and they shit on us 14-1 or whatever. And I think that game blew all the confidence out of the water, and people wanted to just do whatever they thought was best to try to like make things happen the best that they could. And we did not look like ourselves for the rest of the tournament. I mean, I
Hmm.
think we found a good way to win against Heroic, but like I said, like the inconsistencies were just like that. We'd have some days where we'd show up and it would work, and it like was like, hey, we're back. And then we'd follow up with the next game like we had against M80, where it's like, never mind, we're not back.
Right.
So I mean, the game against Elevate was a very solid game, and I do know like they obviously lost to all 3 teams in the group, but like our group was insane. Our group was W7M, us, Koi, G2, and then Elevate. I don't know how necessarily good Elevate was, but Koi, G2, and W7M all made deep runs. They are all good teams, and they proved
Yep.
it at the event. So it's hard to say like we didn't show up against a good Elevate team and beat them the right way, and then we played against W7M and got shit on and lost all our confidence. So it's hard to tell. Like I feel like you have to just pick one opinion or the other, and I don't know if there's like 100% one way to say. But at least to me, and like listening to the comms and like listening, like hearing the demeanor of the team and kind of feeling like the just general aura and atmosphere, it went from like we're a team that has to be reckoned with at this event, and then we got our this was going to be our payback for W7M for what they did to us in Sweden, and it was the exact opposite. It was worse than Sweden, and I think it crushed us.
So after you guys played W7M and they pretty much were like, because at a tournament like SI, when you get smoked that bad by a team, it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe we're not going to be able to win this event. Like
Yeah.
now we're just maybe we want to get like top 8. Like was that kind of the reality that hit? Is like, okay, they're just better. Like they're on a different level than us.
Yeah, and I know that SSG they recorded everything, so you'll get a lot more insight into like all of the communications and stuff afterwards. They'll put that out whenever. I know
Hmm.
Jared's working on it. But it was more like, okay, we had a really bad day, and I know we wanted that really bad, but we need to reset and we need to get on the same page for tomorrow. And then I don't remember, I think it was Koi next, and then it was G2, or it was, I don't remember, kind of like all blurred together. But the next game we played, and we also then didn't perform. And after that match, then the conversation happened again. We can't attack this way. This is not working for us. We like have to actually, I think it actually happened after the last game of groups, where we had that like we can't do this. It's not working. Like we have to do something different. And because we like were in the losers bracket, we had 2 days off. So like in those 2 days off, we spent trying to be like a hardcore structured like old style. I'd say if like we ever went back to the old style, it was there. but it wasn't that like anyone disagreed. It was literally what everyone said like we had to do because we were not playing well. And in those scrims, it didn't go well. And
Yeah.
then afterwards, we're like, guys, like we had been working on this for 2 months. Like this is what we wanted to do. It's not that we can't do it. It's that we're making way too many individual mistakes. People are tunneling. They're not helping each other. We're not rotating properly. We're not taking risks that we need to be making. If we show up individually, it'll make the the attacking like structure work. It's us, not like it, you know?
Mm.
And it was like at that point, then we played heroic, and it was like, see, it will work. We have to do it. Like this is like all we have. This is the only option. Then we played the game against M80, and I would just say like it was. I mean, the theme was close. Obviously, Clubhouse wasn't, but it was still like really the same kind of woes. Like we were able to just run it up on D on theme, and it made it look close.
What did you think about, because this was a lot of the criticism you guys had, at least in group stage, and maybe even in playoffs, was your guys' map pool not great, or were like, because I know a lot of the criticism was that you guys were like picking really good maps for the other teams. Was that like you guys just were not confident in your map pool at all, or was it like you just were that confident in your own maps that you didn't think that their map pool would matter, in a manner of speaking?
Yeah, I think it was more of the latter. Like we did have like there were maps. I mean, in the qual, TSM was always a known strong bank team. In the BO5, they were able to get the map advantage or whatever, and they could pick any map they wanted. They were able to pick bank without us banning it, which I think we were actually planning on banning either before map picks or in the second set. But like we didn't want to play them on it, and they picked
Mhm.
it, which we were surprised because we like we're a hardcore Villa banning team. Like we didn't want to play Sky or Villa.
Right.
So when they didn't pick Villa, we were shocked. And I found out later on it was because they thought that we were like cooking something up on it, and they were like scared to like just pick something that they had no info on. So they went with Bank, and we beat them pretty good, you know,
Yeah.
obviously. And so we were confident in Bank. We were confident in a lot of different maps. And I don't think like I know that that was like the narrative was that the we were picking other teams' good maps, but I will say with pretty much full confidence that it didn't matter what map we played on, we were going to lose anyway.
Yeah.
The way that we were playing, the comms that we had, and the amount of teamwork that we had, we weren't winning on any map. It didn't matter what map we were going to go to. But I will say that we did have conversations like in the tournament that we were ego challenging too much.
Hmm.
But a big part of that is like what I was joking about you earlier about playing you guys on Chalet when we shouldn't have, was
Yeah.
that we would show up when it mattered, and there would be maps that were left over and we wouldn't want to go to them. Which is like, you know, I think every team has those where it's like, yeah, I'm down to take the risk, but when the risk's there, it's like, let's go with what we know the best.
So
We,
following, so sorry
no,
to
you're good.
interrupt you. I was just gonna say, so like, so obviously SI happens. You guys finished top 12, which actually is the same placing you had last year. Maybe
Yeah.
less impressively, but um, when you get back home and the changes start to occur, what happens where you end up out of your position? Like, was that coming down immediately, or did that kind of, once people started getting released and all this stuff, then it kind of just came down on you?
So yeah, so after the event, I think there was a big like we have to do something different because of how bad we looked. You know, even though
Mm.
I would say go try to find me most of the teams at NAL and ask them if they would beg for a 9th through 12th finish at SI, and they would say yes. You know, it is not like I would say something to scoff at, except for I would say unless you're old TSM, Sonics, DZ, us, OXG. Outside of
Mm.
that, you would beg for the finish that we got. So it's like not that we did even that bad. And I would agree, like we got the same finish, but that team with Alex the year before was better than the team we showed up with this year. But we did somehow end up with the same finish, which me personally as a coach, I was very proud with, just because of how bad I thought the team was performing. That we were
Yeah.
still able to make it to the same position we did the year before. I did feel like I was somehow successful in kind of throwing us over whatever line we were going to get to. But I think I knew before that phone call even happened with the GM that like major changes needed to be happening. And like I said, like that was the first time ever I had talked to other players about potentially dropping Rampy ever
Hmm.
like in my career. So I mean that to me like I think is like a big indicator to anyone. Like me and Rampy have been ride to die forever. And I was telling other people I think it's time that we might like probably should like it's up to you guys. I told them that it was way too hard of a decision for me to make, but it was like something that they should probably think about. And the at least the initial decision was that we were going to tell him that like if he didn't kind of like get all of his stuff together, he was going to get one stage to try, and if it didn't work, he was going to be gone stage two, which I
Was
don't
the
even know.
decision to drop Yeti like kind of unanimous within the team after SI?
Yeah, and it was like I will say it had nothing to do with performance, and it
Hmm.
had nothing to do with mental. The only reason why almost no, it was literally everyone. The only reason why everyone wanted to do that immediately was because the way that Yeti sees the game is not the same way that any of us saw the game. You'll even see it when they put out this like video.
Hmm.
Yeti Yeti's ideas and Yeti's reasoning for why things are happening was like literally disagreed by someone every time he said something. So like it wasn't that he was like he said something about inconsistency, which I don't agree with. The only way I would say he was inconsistent was the same way everyone was, and that we wouldn't show up as a team and work together. But like performance wise, he was someone I could always count on because of like how he played the lurking role. The only problem I had was that he never saw the game the same way that any of us did. And I can't like you just can't make a championship level team if there's a person who doesn't agree with what you're doing. So that was like the only reason why I told them initially, well, if we're going to make any changes immediately, it has to be Yeti. And then I think there should be more because of like the motivation issues that we've been talking about. Like we had to have a massive shakeup to like get the team out of the rut that they were in.
So like initially after you have this discussion where it's, and obviously you're involved in this discussion, so at this point you don't think that you're under the assumption you'll still be the coach. So it's like Yeti's gone, maybe Rampy, and then it ends up being you, and I guess Bosco retires. Does this kind of like all just come down at once, or is it just like one after the another, after another, after another?
Yeah, initially it was both Yeti and Rampy. That was like told to me after we said we might just give him one chance. SSG kind of took that as like, well, if you guys are saying like you should give him a chance, and then obviously they read the Twit longer with Alex, like and the things he went through, and like the things like over time and socials, it seemed like Rampy was like most likely the common denominator in a lot of issues
Yeah.
that they said, we're not giving him that one stage you want. He's gone. So it
Hmm.
wasn't like it was from the org, which I think honestly was probably the right decision.
I would have said the
100%.
same
I
thing,
back
to be
them.
honest. If it was me, I would
Yeah.
have said the same thing.
So I don't knock them at all for that. I think that's probably like what the right call was. And then after those were made, nothing was really told to the team because this was all happening while we were still in a hotel waiting to
Yeah.
fly back home. And like traveling with your teammates, like it's weird if all that's coming to light. So
Do
it
you
was
think that
really,
it's like, do you think that sometimes, like, I find it almost kind of weird to, like, immediately just get rid of somebody, like, at the event once it's over? Like, do you not think it's better to sit on it, go home, take a couple days, get the team together, and be like, okay, guys, what's the plan here? Because, like, sometimes it can be, like, a knee-jerk reaction or just, like, an in-the-moment thing when you're just at the event, like, still decompressing from everything going on.
yeah. And you'll see, like, I don't know how much they're going to put out, but hopefully they put out this portion after we got eliminated. I have that conversation with them. I
Hmm.
said, like, I don't know what's going to happen from here. Obviously, this event was poor, and we need to have like some serious talks. I was like, personally, me as a person, I like to really sit on things. I call them letting them simmer, because I like make fun, because sometimes my wife will make things boil. She like wants to talk about it immediately. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not that person. Like I need to think about things. I need to sleep on it for a couple days. I like want to let it kind of
Right.
just be there and think about. But Yeti was probably one of the more front forward people about not wanting to do that. He's like, if my job's in jeopardy, I want to talk about it now. Like I need to know now, which I do understand, because like as a player, you also like, once you know that you're in either in jeopardy or you know you're gone, you need to like find the next team fast. Because if you miss a stage, your career is pretty much over, I would say. Because
Hmm.
people then either forget about you, or they feel like you probably don't play the game enough, or you're washed
Yeah, I
or
agree.
whatever. So I do understand where he is coming from, but that was something I tried to do 100%. But then I also found out how early the stage was supposed to be starting. I don't
Yeah,
know if you saw that like initial date, which
I
I heard
did.
is not the date anymore. And that made me tell Jack, okay, probably we have to do something now. If we're
Hmm.
making major changes and that's when we're going to play, things need to happen fast.
Right.
And so that's when like decisions were being made, and people were finding out whether the people like Bosco and Fultz found out that they were safe very early. This was before Bosco like even told us that he was going to be done. And
Hmm.
then later on, then he did say he was going to be done. So the team was changing more than like anticipated. But it wasn't like at first like what Bosco wanted to do. Because like you said, people need to think about these things and not just like have a knee jerk reaction.
When did you find out that they were going to be going a different way with you? Was it like in unison with Bosco deciding that he was going to leave, so it was like basically just a wipe of the team,
I
or
can't
when did you find out?
I can't really say everything.
Yeah, of course.
But I will just say like it was after all of that.
Hmm.
There was like some sort of teams that we were trying to put together that they didn't really see full value in, and then they ended up going with the team that they're going with, which I believe in a lot. I think it'll be a good team.
Hmm.
I'm unlucky that I'm not a part of it, but yeah, it was after all of that. There was a couple more days where I was still on, and then I was gone.
Okay, and we've been talking for about 2.5 hours now, so I just want to give you a chance to, if there's anything else you'd really want to say, because I think honestly, from what I know, we've talked about basically everything. If there's anything else you'd like to discuss before we kind of call it a wraps here?
I think I'll
Um,
just talk about probably like my future.
sure,
I
go
think
ahead.
that's like the nice, easiest thing. Just so everyone knows, like I am interested in coaching more.
Mhm.
I just want to make sure that the project does make sense for both me and for the people that's a part of, obviously. The biggest thing is I wanted to take one stage off. I've been sprinting for 5 years, doing all of this for so long. I didn't want to just jump into something immediately and it like end up not making sense. So I am aware that like the longer that I'm not a part of a team, the like less likely it is that like I will find a spot. But I am still interested if a team can like reach out that later on down the road. I
Mhm.
would be interested in making something happen and trying to make some magic happen like I did before. I'm going to be watching like this stage and probably doing something along the lines of like what you're doing with, just like analyzing teams, breaking it down, talking about like all their problems and why things aren't working, and what they're
Right.
doing that makes it like work. And I think that'll give teams a chance to just like watch me and kind of learn how I see the game, because I do think I get like a horrible knock for being incredibly old and slow, when I think there is some truthfulness to it, obviously, because we were so good in that meta. But that's not like the only way I see the game. Like like I am saying, like I see the game like a chessboard and strategy. And there are aggressive strategies in chess that work. And I do believe the same goes for Siege. There are ways to be fast and for it to work, and for you still to like be able to work with your team. I just really like teamwork, and I really like working together. And sometimes aggressive plays can be made, but like those aggressive plays can be made with other people making them on top of that to like enhance the round even more, or just make sure you're guaranteeing rounds more often than just like kind of trying to get lucky off of like singular plays. So yeah, I think I'm gonna take one stage off to at least kind of be able to spend some time with my family, because I have sacrificed a lot on their end to make kind of my dreams come true with
Mhm.
Siege. So I'm gonna spend a lot of time with them through the next whenever until the rosters unlock, and then I'll probably make some sort of post about like, hey, if you're interested, if
Yeah.
you weren't happy about what your team did in stage one, I am available. I'm ready to work. I'm ready to rock. Like I'll prove to you like that I can do all of the stuff that I've like always said and I've always proved that I could do. I think those numbers speak for themselves in that tweet that I put out.
I think that
So
whether, I think whether people think you're a good coach or not, or how much importance they put on like the downfall of the SSG roster, I don't think anybody can question that you are individually one of the most successful coaches Siege has had just in team results. Um, and whether people want to say that it's like a dated way of thinking or whatever, their own opinions. I think you'll always have the ability to, flaunt the resume a little bit and say, whether you think that or not, I am one of the most successful coaches that Siege has had. I know how to coach a team, which I think I honestly assume that you'll probably be back in coaching, assuming you decide that you want to continue, as you mentioned. But yeah, I mean, it's we kind of, it took 2.5 hours to get through kind of a general rundown of the Lycan SSG era, almost 5 years. Maybe it didn't end the way you were hoping it would, but like you mentioned, you said that you were honestly proud of getting top 12 at SI. You didn't think the team had that capability, so at least in your mind, maybe you're going out on like you still achieved something that was probably greater than what you were expecting.
yeah, I agree. And I think like the way that I was coaching, if I was to coach again, it would be a little bit different, because I've
Mhm.
like talked a lot about it being like a family kind of thing. But I do think that did lead to a lot of our downfalls that we saw in the last year was, like you're with your family your whole life, so it's a little bit different. But like you pick and prod at your brothers and sisters. Like your parents say stuff when you get older and you're like, I don't have to listen to that anymore. You've been telling me that forever, but I could do my own thing. I'm an adult now.
Right.
I do think that was starting to really creep into our team mentality.
Hmm.
So that's something that I've learned from. And I think if I was to do a team another way, like we wouldn't have that philosophy anymore. I think it would still be something where we could all get along and stuff, but it wouldn't be something where they would have like the kind of say that I would have. Because I feel like if I want to make sure that I don't fall into the woes that kind of like ended up happening, I need to make sure that my players know that like I always have their best interest in heart, but like they won't always have their own best interest in heart, because they all like there are players that sometimes are worried more about survivability than for productivity. And the coach is like kind of the person on the outside looking in that can always kind of say like this is in the at the end of the day best for all of us, and you just need to trust me that it's for the right reason. And I think that I would like more coach like that than I was where I wanted everyone to have a vote. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that wraps it up with Lycan. Thank you, Lycan, for joining me. Hopefully, everybody watching enjoyed this. I think it was a fair conversation about everything that went on. If you made it all the way to the end, congratulations. 2.5 hours of old men talking.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you to Lycan for joining me. I'll
Thanks,
see you
thank you for
next
having
time.
me.
Of course. And I'll see you next time for episode 16.